All right, I will call this meeting to order. This is a select board meeting with a workshop with the budget committee. Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So the only thing on the agenda tonight is the workshop with the budget committee. Although I'd let the board members know that we do have a packet of warrants that we voted on in the last meeting that we need to sign during the course of tonight. So while people are talking. So at this point, I'll turn it over to you, Jerry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for showing up again tonight. I know it's not the best night to be out here, but better to be in here than outside, I guess. So tonight, I'm gonna have Mr. Paul first present the capital improvement stuff. He'll go first. And then we'll have Road Commissioner Calvin Beaumier to present his budget. And then when he's done, I'm gonna update you on some of the stuff that I have done, give you the telecom, debt service and stuff, and talk about solid waste a little bit. So if Paul wants to, you wanna sit over here with us? Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Okay.
Seat's nice and warm for you.
The very front?
Yeah. Page 3. 3 pages. 2 pages.
Okay, thanks everyone. Paul First, the chair of the CIP committee. So this was the CIP committee's, I believe, 4th year doing the CIP process this year. And it was a fairly typical year in that we all met an initial time just to vet the materials that were submitted by staff and to ask any questions of the manager that we have with regard to the 5-year plan and the schedules and also the applications. And then we had a second meeting, we put our questions together, and we had a second meeting where we met with both the road commissioner and the fire chief to get any questions answered that we had that were remaining. So I'd say overall it was a challenging year from the perspective of a number of projects that really rose to the top in terms of importance. And after we met with staff, we all the committee members, there are 4 of us, we went off on our own. We scored the projects according to the scoring metrics that are in the policy, and then those scores were then aggregated and developed into the ranking of the projects that I believe you received in your notebooks. And I don't have a copy of your notebooks, so I don't know exactly what you received, but my understanding is that you received both the memo and the rankings. So, with regard to the rankings, the Public Works Stream Crossing ranked number 1. And you can also refer to the notes in the memo with regard to why some of these things ranked where they did. Number 2 was the fire department Plymouth exhaust removal. Number 3 was the fire department Quint rehab. Number 4 was the public works truck. I believe that's a 1-ton. The next one was assessing, and that's saving up for the reval. Following assessing was the chief's truck, the fire department chief's truck. And then following the truck was the fire department generator, then the public works reserve, and the town office generator then was the final one that was ranked. So, I will encourage you, rather than going through the memo in detail, I really encourage you to read it, because, we all took some time as a committee to develop these thoughts, these notes, with regard to, why we emphasize some projects and not others. So please read the notes in the memo. And I will mention that we will be meeting, we'd like to see the reserves generally rank higher than they've been ranking. I think we need to do a little tweaking to our scoring regimen, which seems to emphasize projects that are more of an immediate need and that have, for example, an immediate public safety benefit. And so as a committee, we're talking about getting together later, probably next fall, to see if any, tweaks might be needed to the scoring, which would then go to the selectmen. But beyond that, also, another thing that I'll just mention here right up front, we'd like to see better definition with regard to the account balances. And the reserve accounts need to be set up in TRIO in the accounting system as separate accounts so that they can be better tracked.
We would have thought that was.
So I'll leave it at that. And I'm assuming also that as you go through your meeting tonight, I don't know what you guys did last week, or I guess it was Tuesday, if you've met with the department heads, but I see them both here tonight, so I'm assuming you're meeting with them tonight. I certainly did find that through the process this year, both the Public Works Director and the Fire Chief did a tremendous job with regard to really putting together complete applications. I think they really nailed it pretty well in terms of the detail. So if you have specific project questions, that might be worth saving for the department heads when you're doing their budgets, I would suggest. But if you have questions about CIP, I'd certainly be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Yeah, Heather.
Hi, Paul. Thanks for coming tonight. I have a
Yeah.
question about the process.
Sure.
Does your committee only review things that are given to you and then you make recommendations based on that? Or does your committee work at all to identify any potential capital improvement projects? Or is it just you're just reviewing what you've been given?
Just what I'm given. So
Okay.
that's up to staff to bring projects forward and to submit the applications. And, we have the policy, if you haven't seen it, it gives a very specific process for putting forth the application and exactly what to include on the application. So we look for those applications from staff. And we look for them to be aligned with their schedules, with what their plan is going forward. But at the same time, we realize not all projects are gonna be on the schedule. Sometimes needs come up, capital needs that aren't on the schedule.
Could I'm just wondering, and this is probably something that I can read, so if this is an appropriate time to ask that, you can certainly tell me. Are other committees allowed to fill out those requests, or are they only allowed to come from town staff?
I think they're only allowed to come through the manager,
Okay.
yeah.
So a committee member could go through the town manager to submit an application.
Okay.
And before they come to the committee, they go to the selectmen. So both the schedules and the applications go to the selectmen for an initial vetting, just to make sure everybody's on the same page with regard to, this is something we should be looking at.
Okay, thank you.
The pages that were given in our book, each project has what appears to be a summary. Amount requested, department name, date prepared, etc. One of those is potential funding sources. Who made that recommendation? Is that the CIP committee?
Okay, yeah, great question. So, we talked about this initially. At the end of the day, we really felt that for a number of reasons, it makes sense for the decision with regard to, for example, our ARPA funds to be used, for that to be left to the selectmen or to the community, or however the selectmen determine that decision is going to be made.
So potential funding sources was filled in by the selectmen?
No, potential funding sources were filled in by staff, but those are
Okay.
just, potential. At the end of the day, that's a decision that gets made prior to town meeting, and will be included in the warrant,
Right.
I assume.
Yep.
So, but we're not really to the point, it's really at this point, it's too early, it was too early for us to say, we don't have that full picture
No,
with regard to
and
the
hence the
funding
word
sources.
potential. I was just
Yeah.
curious.
Exactly,
where it
so,
came from.
yeah, we didn't wade into that.
Okay.
I think from CIP's perspective, also whether it comes from the right pocket or the left pocket, that's really not, a decision that, we're in a position to make, or, that really, would be useful for us to make.
I can expand on that a little bit, just to summarize the process, like what happens next. And so the board takes, the spirit of the process, and it's the way it's articulated in the process document, is that the board would take this and that we would resist, if at all possible, unless some unusual circumstance changes or whatever, messing with the order, priority order. Really the decision we have is how far down the list can we afford to go this year? Given, what's happening on the operational side of the budget, what do we feel comfortable with proposing to spend on the capital side of the budget? And then on the funding sources in a typical year, the question would then become, how much might come from reserves, how much might be raised as taxes that year, or how much might come from undesignated funds or something like that. This year, we have the added wrinkle of ARPA funds. So one of the things that will be in the discussion when the board is going through these is, which of these things are potential ARPA funding candidates, so that they don't impact taxes or require drawing reserves. But that will be part of the board discussion when we go through these.
Okay, any other questions?
Excuse me, guess a general one. How do we know how much money, and you bring it in, you say, right now we got a lump sum of all reserves. I'm assuming that one of the things you're recommending, or came up on the list, was assessing, there was 60,000 approved last year, which has gotta be used for assessing, if I understand the process right. But how do we know on the breakout, for instance, how do we know that whatever it is that we approve for the fire department is gonna buy a new Quint in 7 to 10 years, or?
We are not
Okay.
buying a new Quint in
This is a
17
very
years.
important question that I'd like to address. From a couple of perspectives. One is when a department head makes a reserve request, there are two types of applications, okay? There's a reserve request and there's a project request. Reserve requests are to build up the savings, the reserve, for
Right.
future years, okay? A project request is to do something, to buy something, or a service, or something like that, in the next fiscal year. But that money is to be spent that next year. So, we've been going through this process for the last 4 years, and it's important that the reserve, that we have separate reserve accounts, so those funds can be stewarded separately, and it's easy for us to track, what has been appropriated for reserve over the years, so we have a well-defined balance, and we know what's available. Excuse me.
Yeah, so just to expand on that, so when the CIP started their work this year, Jerry was really just starting the process of trying to figure out all the accounts in Trio and the bank accounts and what was in what and whatever, and he's called in people to help him. He's worked with our representative, Androscoggin Bank, a lot. So we and the auditor as well. So we know now, because it was always tracked on, even though the money was in oftentimes like a single account, we do have tracking as to the balances for each of those reserves. And when CIP started their process, quite honestly, we didn't have numbers that we were confident in about those balances. But the accounting work has been done, and Jerry, I think we feel good about what the balances are. We know what's in all the various reserves. But Paul is right. We need to go to the next step and actually have them be separate accounts in Trio, so that they're tracked better.
Yeah, so when we had that meeting with the auditor showed up and she handed out the overview, the reserve balances are there, so we're pretty confident. So what I gotta do is go back to the warrant last year and add what's supposed to be in there and get them up to date. I just haven't had enough time to do that with everything going on. I've started it, but I just haven't finished it.
Yeah, and, you know, I just want to commend the staff, because I know that the new manager, you know, stepped into all of the pieces that are around being a manager and taking on this big new job here just not long ago, and was able to pull together all the CIP materials very effectively, I feel. But there was, when the committee met, there was still some lingering question with regard to what the reserve balances are. I haven't, since that time, I haven't spoken with Jerry. You know, I don't know where that landed, where you guys landed with regard to reserve balances. But I think still in the future, the important thing to note is that they should be tracked with separate account numbers in Trio, which will make it just easier from an accounting perspective. I mean, that's just that, I think that's the committee's suggestion and, you know, my suggestion, but of course, you know, these decisions are decisions of the selectmen and
I think
the
everybody's
manager.
on board with.
If I could maybe just
Yeah.
rephrase my question is, the only reserve that's a recommendation is here is for assessing. That, as I read
No,
in
there's-
all
No.
the stuff that was provided, correct?
Number 8 is a public works reserve.
Fire department,
It says
capital reserve.
Okay. Oh, you're
Yeah,
right, I'm
reserve,
sorry.
capital,
So there's
yeah.
100,000 there. So that starts building up something for a new dump truck or whatever, but should we, and maybe this is the wrong year to do it, should we start saying that in, because of the way I read it, you fix the quint this year, and it's good for 7 to 10 years. So if we
Right.
assume that a quint is $1.5 million,
Yep.
do we wanna build up a reserve to pay $1.5 million, borrow the money 10 years from now? That's what I'm, being the new guy, having trouble coming to
Yeah,
grasp.
well, I will say, you know, in particular with regard to the Quint, we haven't really crossed that bridge yet. We've really been focused on crossing the bridge of what do we do with regard to the current Quint? And does it make sense to, you know, purchase a new Quint or a used Quint or invest in the Quint we have? And I think the solution that was arrived at was based on quite a bit of research and negotiation with.
I'm not
Yeah.
arguing any of that, but maybe
Yeah.
let's take the
So-
quint out of it, other things are gonna break,
Yes,
you know, and
yes.
is there enough in the reserve to do
Yes,
that?
the schedule. So what you need to look at is the schedule. And hopefully you have the reserve schedules in your packets. If you don't have them this year, then hopefully you'll have them in the future.
Are you talking like the 5-year plans for each department?
Well, you know, you can look at the 5-year plan, or that's fine, or you can look at the schedule. There are 3 pieces to the process. One is the schedules. The schedules go out approximately 15 years, and they look at the expenditures, the anticipated department expenditures for capital equipment for the next 15 years. And they give you a sense of, you know, what's coming up. You should be able to see that also on the 5-year plan for the next 5 years. But, you know, yes, the answer is yes. You know, we need to be funding those reserves. We do need to be funding them. And I think it's unfortunate that the Public Works Reserve ranked as low as it did this year. And I think that there's, you know, a couple reasons why that is. But we need to be funding those reserves. And what happens is, based on their schedules, the department heads each year submit a reserve request. So, you know, they will tell us as we start the process how much they're asking for to fund their reserve, you know, keeping in mind what they've got coming, you know, the next year out, the year after that, year 5, year 6. You know, that's the purpose of the process, is for them to come to us with a reserve request.
To layer onto that, like, when you look at a schedule, it's not necessarily a given that we need to have saved reserves all the way, like, for everything on the schedule. It's always, you know, there are multiple funding sources. It could be reserves, it could be just, you could be borrowing money, you could just raise taxes and pay for something. So especially in the current environment, like for years, and interest rates were so low that there were a lot of board members that felt that, you know, it wasn't really cost effective to be piling money into reserves if you're paying 1.5%, 2%, you know, to bond money, because you're not really making any money on the reserves. In fact, you might be losing present value on reserves. So it's tough to know how you will finance something 15 years out, you know, but I think to Paul's point, you try to have, the object of the reserves is that over time, like in a particular year, you might tap into reserves more, and another year you might tap into it less, but the objective is to keep the capital impact fairly consistent, you know, from year to year, so that we don't have big, you know, spikes and troughs in terms of what we're raising in taxes to fund capital items. So Heather, you had your hand up for a while. Do you have
I was curious about, I remember last year, we looked at a spreadsheet and we input, when we were trying to figure out how much money we wanted to allocate to these certain things. And we were able to see if we put, you know, $63,000 here, how that played out. Is that the schedule? And does that represent the money that should be in the account? And has that been cross-referenced?
I think what you're talking about is it's actually a spreadsheet that I built a few years ago that helps us see what the tax impact is. So like, if we did this much money in reserves, this would be the tax impact. If we did a different amount, this would be the tax impact.
Well, the one that I'm talking about, it was like the specific thing, and then over a number of years, and if we put the money in, and then we bought the truck, this was what we had left over, and that's how it played out going forward.
We do not have that right now. In fact, that's probably a next step on this in terms of, you know, getting the schedule and then having a multi-year reserve savings plan, if you will.
Right.
But that's a very complicated financial endeavor to do that out when you're trying to track in and out. So I think that's kind of like a next step in terms of, you know, trying to maximize the advantages of the CIP.
So I remember when we looked at that, I thought the numbers on that specific thing were the numbers that we had in capital reserve accounts. I don't know if that's helpful to try to cross-reference with or not, but
No,
that was where we were like,
That wouldn't be a reliable document at this point.
okay.
So,
Yeah, Jerry?
You have to be really careful with the spreadsheets. I mean, I think I know what spreadsheet you're talking about, and then like, it went all the way down to like 2039, and the truck was gonna be like 425,000. I don't think that's very helpful to us today.
I just didn't know if those balances represented at that time, which would have been last year in this process, how much money was in each capital account in reserves.
It's not helpful to me. I can certainly share it with you and give it to you, but things are always moving, so it's never really accurate for any one time. Like we just bought a scanner to do the CEO, and so that would have moved, so it wouldn't have been accurate. So I would really.
but you'd be able to tell what you purchased since that date.
Yeah, if you knew about it.
Right. Or you should know about
If
it.
you know,
I'm thinking.
yeah, but I would know about it,
Right.
and I would put it in there, but it still moves, and like, there was interest rates in there that are just estimated, and
Right.
it's just not very accurate information. This stuff, we have a $21,000 accounting system, and we're doing things in spreadsheets. I'm not saying you don't use spreadsheets to help you, but you certainly should use spreadsheets. I just got a new computer, and I got Office 365, so when I got that, my spreadsheets are now acting really funny because it's a different software thing. I mean, it's just, I have to be very careful when I go in there and change things. I was working with Cal today, and you think you change things, it'll just automatically update? No, it's not automatically update because I got a new version of Excel, so it's not talking.
You should, anybody that has Office 365 should always open it in the desktop app. Don't work in the 365 environment.
You know, so
Yeah.
I was updating spreadsheets, and I was really
Yeah.
screwed because it wasn't behaving
So
like
there-
it typically would, so it's,
So I'm gonna reel this in a bit, cause this isn't really, it isn't, germane to our scope of work that we have right now. I mean, there's a lot of work to be done, and I think, Joe said there's actually, CIP's gonna have, follow-up meetings over the next few months to talk about some of these issues, and try to make the process, work even better.
I would like to make one comment, and that is, part of this process is, as we mentioned, that the department heads, they put together these schedules based on what they think their needs are gonna be in the coming years. And then they come to us with a reserve request. So then the reserve request comes to you, and you figure out, kind of what the balance is, how much you can fund. This is one of the reasons why every year it's a dynamic process, because it doesn't get funded fully. The money is usually not there to fund it fully. It usually gets cut as part of this process. So, anyway, thank you, and it sounds like,
I have one more CIP question for
If it's
you.
relevant to the work, if it's related to the work this year, then great.
Yeah, yeah. Did fire department submit a request for a reserve? Cause I don't have that in my booklet.
they did not submit a request this year. Now, my understanding is that they have currently, they're carrying a healthier reserve balance than Public Works is. So I think that their emphasis was more on the projects this year rather than their reserve account.
Public Works didn't submit a reserve request either, did they?
Yes, they
number
did.
8.
I have a second question, but it's
not
for a
in that- on
department
this-
head,
is that-
so.
On this page, the front of the book is the.
Yeah, like page 2 in the book.
It's not in the budget.
Huh?
It's not in the budget?
Did you? No. No.
That's the operational budget, it's not capital.
We're gonna get a capital budget?
That's what we're talking about right now.
What are we gonna be getting for a capital budget? A document that has all that stuff on it?
Eventually what we'll do is we'll have the spreadsheet that brings together operational, capital, and like what the combined impact of those are. So, with the capital stuff, those are typically, each one is, typically its own warrant article question on the, own article on the warrant. And so you guys will be voting and discussing individually whether to, recommend or not to fund that, that capital request.
I sent that spreadsheet
Yeah,
to you.
I have one for you right
That
here.
lists all the capital on it. You got it in the spreadsheet.
With that in mind, Jerry, I have a question for you. So, under the capital budget, it shows for last year's budget, a total of $4,215,051. Under the proposed budget for 2023, if all nine of those requests are expended, the total would be $4,407,003, which is a higher amount than last year's amount, $4,407,000 versus $4,215,000.
That sounds like the entire budget, not just capital.
Right, that sounds awful high for capital.
Oh. All right, so I can still ask, the question will still work.
All right, you can repurpose that question.
Well, you guys are moving on to budget.
Repurpose the question, change the numbers.
Yeah.
Last year's expenditure for capital budget was $574,000. Listed for this year, if all nine go through, it would be $605,800. This year, $605,800 versus last year's $574,000. However, it's showing in your follow-up columns, it's showing that this year's amount is a decrease of, if I can read it. No, I must be reading it wrong because it's showing last year's figure. It's showing a decrease of 100%.
He's looking at your tax impact.
Oh, 'cause you didn't send that to us then. You only sent it to them?
Well, they requested it in an email, so I just send it.
It says Durham Municipal Budget
You have
Workshop.
it, apparently.
It might
Okay.
not be accurate. It sounds like Kevin needs to review it.
Well, it
So
it
what-
just sounds,
what's your, what,
that column
numbers
shouldn't be
aside,
there.
what's the question? You worried about
Well-
one number bigger than another one, or what's?
well, because I was seeing a higher number under expenditure for this year than last year, but I was showing it as a decrease in the last year versus this year column.
Correct.
But I understand I've answered my own
Oh,
question.
yeah, because the numbers haven't been entered in the
Correct.
TY column yet,
Yep.
yeah, so,
Sorry about that.
yeah, no, that's fine.
But if you looked at the grand total,
You did see it, and I just put it in the capital request one, that's all.
Yeah, no, that's good.
if you looked
So-
in the grand total, the question would have made sense, but my question only related to the
Yeah, we
capital
haven't,
budget.
yeah, cause the number, yeah, so, right. So, but that eventually that'll all, like, for instance, what you guys will get after the select board, after we make our recommendations, you'll get a version of that document, that'll be updated with, what our recommendation is for everything, right? And it'll be all filled in, and you'll be able to see, if approved as, the select board have it, this would be the estimated tax impact. It's important that we say it's estimated because we don't know our state valuation. There's a lot of variables that we don't know until we actually commit taxes in July. In fact, it's almost always the case that what the tax rate actually ends up being is less than that estimate, because that estimate uses last year's valuation, and the valuation almost always goes up, and it's certainly in this environment, we would expect it to go up again. But you'll at least have that as a ballpark estimate of what the tax impact will be.
Does anybody have any questions specifically for Paul? Because he looks
Yeah.
like he might like to leave this.
Well,
Yeah.
I'd like to hand the mic back over to Jerry, because I'm hearing questions that are non-CIP related, so I kind of feel like he should have his mic back.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Paul.
So Kevin, before we move on, I want to make a general question or statement.
Okay,
So in the current process that we have, requests go to the select board, then go to the CIP channel to rank them.
well, I would say they go to town manager and solicits them from department heads, or maybe it might be a committee chair, or whatever, and then they all come to the board for review. And I don't think we've ever said, no, don't send that one. It's just, we just look at them and maybe ask some questions, and sometimes things get tweaked a little bit before they go on, and then they go on to the CIP committee. Where it could possibly happen down the road is like, when the board reviews those initial requests, that's where the board is having discussions about the schedules, and the board will, I think, in the future, and has in the past, work with, town manager or department heads about what should be on the schedule. Like, I hate to pick on the Quint, but I'll use it as an example. It might not be on the schedule for a replacement in 7 to 10 years. It might be something else, or it might be, but that's where the board would make a decision on what even goes on the schedule, and then that kind of provides the parameters for the CIP and town manager work on from there.
So with that said, though, wouldn't it be prudent for every year for the departments to put in a wish list for their capital reserve,
They
a
do.
dollar amount? But if it doesn't even make it to the town floor, then, shouldn't that be separate than the actual projects?
Well, it is. Oh, are you talking specifically? Yeah, it does. It does go to town floor.
I think she means ranked separately,
No,
like
but
not
like,
even part of the CIP
so,
ranking.
I think it's the fire department or the public works asked for 100,000
Yeah.
or whatever. But shouldn't every department, based on their 5-year plan, be asking for something to kind of move us forward?
Potentially, yes, but I think that's part of the work I was talking about earlier, where we need to get a better handle on what is the long-range savings reserve plan we need to execute against the schedule as it's presented. And that's work a lot of it still needs to be done. But it is, as it is now, it's up to department heads. Like, I asked the chief myself, like, really no reserve request from you this year, and And he had a very good explanation for that. You know, it's just, you know, for this year, given the balance of his account now and the other things he was looking at, that he didn't feel the need to ask for that this year. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Chief. I don't want to speak for you. But
Thanks for the setup. Let me explain it Massachusetts way. The question arose, and it's great that you guys are on top of this. I think I need an ambulance in 2029, okay? That's a 10-year, that's 2019, 2029. Do I just keep asking for 50,000, because it's gonna be $500,000 by then? Do I just keep asking for 50,000 for the next 10 years, and boom, I have $500,000? That's not up to me. It's actually up to you. Do I hold your money for 5 to 10 years, and then buy it? Do we bond it? The question is, how do you wanna purchase that in 10 years? It's up to me to explain, in 10 years, I need an ambulance, this is probably how much it's going to be, and then we have the powers to be that are voted on. How do you wanna do that? Do you want all that money in reserve? Do you want half of it in reserve?
that's an excellent point. and I-
As
and
a
I would agree
taxpayer,
with
I
that.
don't wanna have to come up with 500.
Correct, but as a taxpayer, do you
In
want
one year.
half? Do you want a quarter? Do you want?
Well, I don't know.
more?
That's-
Well, see,
that's
But
your
there's,
job.
see, that's part of the discussion in the like, and I think that's an excellent point, and that it's really up to the department heads on their schedules to put out, you know, what will need to be funded. And then it falls upon the town manager and the select board, and then probably with some expert financial assistance to figure out a funding plan for those needs in future years. Like, you know, and there's so many variables there, like, what do you
Right.
think interest rates will be like in 5 years, you know, or what, you know, because again, if money's really cheap, that puts less of a premium on reserves, and it makes, you know, bonding pretty cheap. One thing Jerry has brought that might be a little innovative for Durham is when it comes time for, you know, the next dump truck, we might look at a lease type of arrangement versus, you know, just buying it. You know, that's something that he's interested in looking at and has some experience with. So, I think so it's up to the department heads to put on the schedule what needs to be funded, and then it's up to town staff, working with the board and finance people to figure out, you know, how it would be funded.
And we did talk about, because I am also on the CIP committee, so I spin my hat and become just the citizen looking at these projects. We did talk about, you know, some of the CIP, you know, projects which should be, you know, ranked and as maybe separate entities from the reserves themselves, and not have it be in one list. Because you're right, it's something you have to look forward to, but it's a
Right,
matter
it's
of.
always gonna get kicked to the end.
Well,
It
but
might
you-
be the
you mi-
reserves
might-
don't go to CIP
Yeah,
at all.
might reserve don't end up eventually going to CIP, because it really is, once you put that plan together for 10 years and you've nailed it down, and I say nail it down loosely,
As
because
best as you
something
can.
might happen,
Right.
right? You might have something go wrong with a vehicle that you have to fix. Set that aside for a second, but if everything was a perfect world, and you planned out 10 years, then it might be just up between the finance committee and the select board to say, all right, fire department gets this much every year because we have these 5 things coming up over the next 10 years. And public works gets this amount, and it's just automatic every year, it ends up on the warrant, that's what we need to do to run our business. And then if you take those off, then you just end up with your capital projects for say the next year, or maybe the 2-year plan for capital projects that you're saving for immediately. And you focus on those.
Right.
So like Paul mentioned, that we talked about getting together later on this year, a little earlier than when it comes time to do this process, and start looking at a few of those things to see if we tweak the CIP methodology a little bit and present it to the select board and, of course, to think about, but.
Yeah, I'm gonna go to Paul, and then I'll come to you, Heather.
Okay, one comment here that I think is relevant, and that is, right now, we're paying for past capital expenditures, and we're doing that through our bond payments.
Right.
And we currently have 950,000
Yeah,
in
it's
annual
yeah.
bond payments, somewhere around that.
plus or minus 5 grand.
So you're not going to fund these accounts fully right now,
Right.
because you can't pay both for your past
Right.
expenditures and your future ones at the same time. You can begin to build up these savings, and I think the question about, what's the goal? What should we be looking to fund at in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years? That's a really good question. But that piece, that background is very important.
Yeah.
We can't fund these accounts fully right now.
Starting
because-
next year, bonds start to come off.
And that's what you have to,
Hey.
look
Right.
at going forward. So it's fairly complex. There are a lot of elements in
Right.
this that we have to plan in.
Yep.
And that's why it hasn't happened yet. We're still getting really the foundation built, and then we can tweak it.
Somewhat no different than having your car payment go away and say, well, I'm gonna keep paying that for my
Redirecting it.
next car.
Right, yeah.
Right,
Right.
I mean, something to that alignment, may work, I'm not sure, it's something we need to discuss.
Heather, you had a,
Well, so my brain was doing this before we got here, because I've been looking at the way some other municipalities do things, and the separating out of these things, I do see happening a lot in other municipalities. I also feel like that really leaves the decision about the projects in the hands of the voters if it is separate, because the Quint is taking a hit here. I'm sorry, I'm just using it as an example. There may be residents, when you put that on as a capital improvement project, that don't want to fund that, but still want to fund the fire department for that year. They don't see the Quint necessarily as a priority. So I do think separating the two is definitely worth exploring, and I do think it's the way that a lot of other
separating in the
places.
CIP ranking?
Yeah.
That's, okay.
Yeah. Or just the projects go to CIP, like Joe was saying, just the projects go to CIP, and the reserves are not tied to that.
Right, that could, you could see a scenario, so if we were on almost like if we had a planned reserve schedule,
Right.
then
Separate the two.
the calculations for the board, instead of, right now, it's like, okay, this is what we need in operating, and then capital, how far down the list can we go? It would become, okay, this is operating, this is what we need to put aside for reserves, on the reserves plan, how much do we have left for projects that year? It would be kind of like that kind of a.
Or here's the project, where do the funds come from?
Well, that's part of,
right.
like, how are you using reserves throughout that process, so.
Right.
Cause there's kind of two types of reserves too, sometimes reserves, like for instance with the old town hall, reserves are for a very specific purpose. But whereas, reserves that go into, like say, fire department or public works, they might have in their mind that, well, yeah, I'm saving for this truck, or I'm saving for this, piece of apparatus. But, as long as it's used for something within that department, it could be a different truck or a different apparatus than what the League were originally thinking. But as long as it's within their world, then that's okay. But it might be, and again, to use the Quint, but maybe, you say, you know what, if the town said, we really need to have Quint, and that's gonna cost us $1.5 million, so we wanna do a specific reserve account for the Quint. And then you would like go every year. Assessing is an example of that now. We're gonna be asking for, I don't know, what are we asking for, $50,000 a year for a certain number of years to do a full revaluation in the town? 60. 60, okay. So that's an example of asking for a reserve for a very specific purpose. Yeah, Joe.
Chief, I'd like to follow up with your statement to clarify.
Sure.
You made the comment that you didn't request reserve funding because you felt it was up to, you kind of said all of us, which I know it's not up to the budget committee. So were you under the impression that just because you didn't request it, the select board could still put it up as a warrant at town meeting?
I was not under that impression. I certainly have day-to-day discussions with the town manager that goes through to the select board. It was my feeling this year, as a department head, that I had a robust reserve account that could pay for everything that I asked for. If that's what the voters wanted, and that's what you all, the select board, come up with. I also wanted to let you all do it. Now, Rockport would do like fire department, 30,000 every year in their budget was a reserve. That was apparatus reserve. So my budget in theory would be 530, and 30 of that would go to reserve. It was a line item. And you could do 50 50, you do whatever you want. But this year particularly, I wasn't under any auspices of that opinion. I wanted everyone to figure out how you all wanted to pay for that. Now, if that is a reserve line account for Calvin and I, every year you can come up with 30 or 50, whatever you come up with, we can do it that way. Or there's special years of ARPA funds. None of it, and you asked another great question, is you'll see on the fire department, how do you want to spend that or raise it? It's not up to me. I did say ARPA because that was one of the questions. I was just filling in the box. Really. I didn't, and it's also Scotia politics. It really is, because I asked for a lot this year for the fire department, for capital, and I knew we needed that. So I wanted to keep level funded for my budget. As we're asking for more on this side, I'd like to level fund this side. And I didn't want to ask for $50,000 just for reserve. You know, fire trucks are getting more expensive. We have a 2001, several 2001s, so you know, those are expensive. But I want to be told how you want to pay for it, how you want to plan for it, and then I can input the wisdom from there. That was my thinking, just for this department head, being new still and learning the flavor of the town. This is all about Durham, the taxpayers, the budget, and the select board. So this year, like you've nodded, you affirmed it. I didn't want to add a reserve because I asked for a lot.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Sure.
I think-
I hope it did.
I think putting down the funding source and saying ARPA is helpful because, you know, unless you read through that 94-page manual of what funds can be used for, you know, it's helpful to know if something listed can be paid for that way or if it's not an option to be paid for that way. So I appreciate that detail.
Yeah, and by that, even if that detail wasn't on the actual application, I mean, that will be part of what you get to review for recommendations. Well, you know, we have to identify where the funding is coming from for everything we're sending over to you.
Okay.
Okay, yes, Jill.
I was hoping to get some clarification, I guess, from Department Head Jerry, the town manager, as to why the market adjustment did not get performed.
That's a good question.
That is a good question. You all voted, when I come here in August, it wasn't done. I talked to Donna, she thought that it was a little bit too late to do it, the market adjustment, and it's been a while since Durham has had a full reevaluation, and she believes that it's time to do that. So she talked to me and said, we need to put money aside to do a full market reval, because every 10 years, you're really scheduled to do it. It's been like 12 years for us, so by the time we do it in 2025 is what she's thinking, it's gonna be 15 years and well past due.
Yeah.
That's not how it was presented to the town last year.
Right, no.
I wasn't here.
But I can speak to that. So yeah, I mean, initially, I think it was actually 2 years ago where we came to the town for the funds for a market adjustment. You know, it was really just before the pandemic. And we all know what happened to real estate values, you know, going into the pandemic. And so she wanted to hold off a year doing that. At that time, because of what was going on with real estate values, she thought they might come back down, but they really haven't come back down that much. So yeah, they keep going up. And then by the time we got to the point, we said, okay, you know, we're ready to do the market reval. Like Jerry said, her recommendation was, you know, at this point, you know, that her advice was to just wait, you know, save the money, do a full reval, because to spend the money on a market adjustment now, when things are as out of whack as they are in terms of our valuation in total versus what we have on our books for the valuation, that we'd just be, you know, we'd be doing the full revaluation right on the heels of the market revaluation anyway, and it would be a waste of money. So it was her recommendation that we do the full market reval and save for 2 or 3 years to do that. So
I guess I'm still confused what occurred in that 4 to 6 months, because it was presented to us that if we did the market adjustment, we'd be able to postpone the market reevaluation by 10 years, and it was a savings to the town.
That was before what happened in the real estate market due to the pandemic, so if you want more detailed information, then you could work through Jerry and talk to Donna.
Donna's
but-
more of the expertise
Yeah.
in that. But a market, if you don't do a full market revale and you just do an adjustment, that can't go 20 years
Right.
before you.
No,
that-
we were told it would go 10, and that was this,
And
it
that's
was a
always
year
an
ago.
estimate, that's always an
Yeah.
estimate with assumptions on market conditions and whatever. You know, nobody's got a crystal ball, things change, and in this case, things changed a lot. So that changed the game on the ground, so.
wasn't this last year?
Yeah, it wasn't
It was-
pre-pandemic, it was
was
last
last
year. that
year,
we
yeah.
voted
No,
on
the
the
original
money.
money was pre-pandemic. And I think we may have reauthorized it last year, but I don't remember exactly, but the money is still in the assessing account, it's, you know, it's dedicated to that, it's not going anywhere else, so.
Right, but our homestead percentage that we're getting back is going down because we keep not doing this because ...
Yeah, well, and again, that's part of what I said earlier, is that, you know, we're so out of whack now that a market, because of what's going on in the real estate market, that a market adjustment is not gonna get us there back to where we need to be to get 100% homestead exemption reimbursement, so, you know, hence the recommendation to do the full reval, which we're overdue for anyway. Even now, we're overdue for.
And I met Donna and was talking with her, and Donna is the expert. I'm gonna listen to her all day long, and if that's what she's recommending,
Yeah.
that's what I'm gonna do.
Because if we sat up here and told you, yeah, the expert said this, but we're gonna do something else, you guys would be killing us.
No, I guess part of,
Yeah, you would.
part of my frustration is, we can find several things where we recommend, where the town approves spending the money, and then the money didn't get spent.
That happens every day, every town,
I think
all
there's
across
different
America.
dynamics to it, Joe. I mean, just like the stream crossings.
Right,
That's a prime
no,
example.
but that's
You
why I
can't-
was asking
There's certain
why,
things you can't
and,
control. I didn't, I'm kinda quasi in the real estate market. Nobody predicted what was gonna happen this year with real estate. Nobody did. And look at it, it's still continuing. You thought you'd slow it down with this, 7.5%, 8% interest rates, and you still haven't. So it's just one of those things that she made a decision based on the market. She's the expert for that particular market. We followed her advice.
All right, so are we,
Just
Yep.
one more thing, so my concern, I shared this concern, my concern was that we raised the money specifically for that, but I'm back looking at last year's warrant, and it just says appropriate from the existing account, the
Right.
existing municipal. So I have less concerns about the fact that we didn't raise the money to do it, and, this is a process question I'll ask later, just putting it out there that I do wanna come back to what would happen under an obligation if we had raised it versus appropriate, but we don't need to talk about that now.
okay. Okay. Anything else on capital? Can we move on to, public works? We good? Okay. No?
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Paul. See you, buddy.
But the money part of it doesn't matter. It's just the recommendation part of it.
If you want, I can just go down through this and then questions afterwards, and just go through the whole thing.
So is that
You
you
wanna start
telling
with a
us?
summary, like, kind of big picture overall, any big trends, any big deltas that you'll talk more in detail about as you go through, or is this kind of like a maintenance business as usual?
Maintenance business as usual, I'll go down through. Jerry wanted to keep it flat, I did the best I could, but still not flat. Drove a hard bargain, but this is about as skinny as I could make it, so. So I'll go down through if that's what you want, and then you guys can ask questions afterwards, but follow along in the written text. They should all be in order, except for the janitorial wages, which on here's on the bottom, and then here it's number 4. Just disregard that one until, I guess we'll take care of it up front. So starting with the road commissioner's salary, Mitch, prior interim town manager, set that at $73,500. with expanded roles of facilities manager, and a lot of things that weren't getting done. For example, under here, once I started going through all the buildings, a lot of the posts that are holding up this floor were laying on the ground and had rusted off and were just laying there, and other parts of the mortar were gone. And we were like, I don't know what's holding up this floor, but so I was able to get that fixed and do the AC and air conditioning at the fire station, town office. And I'm still working on putting a list together so that there's one place that's keeping track of, for example, the furnace that was over the town office had caught on fire and hadn't been cleaned in so long, the side panels blew off. And so just having a place where someone is managing all of that in one place. Labor, we're looking at 5% for increase for, I'm assuming we'll do a merit wage-based review of all the employees. And how much of that will end up being merit-based and how much of it will end up being COLA will have to be determined by Jerry and what the market is at the time. FICA per town manager, or actually workers' comp, Jerry got that number reduced by $7,182 directly from workers' comp insurance. FICA, increase of 7.65, he got that number from wherever you get that from. Medicare, increase of $491. Insurance, increase of $4,446 to $95,650. And that is, hold on, look, that is, insurance is, this insurance is Maine Municipal Health Trust premiums, dental, income protection, life insurance, that kind of stuff for employees. The electricity utilities is at 19, spent 16,410. I'd like to decrease that by $1,000. That's for internet, cell phone, heating, oil, cable, electricity. The communications, two-way radios, where that went here. Oh, flat, that's truck handheld radios, repair, maintenance, employee cell phone stipends. I don't see that we're gonna need a new radio for our new truck this year. We already have one. It's in the old truck we're gonna swap over, and we have a couple more on the shelf, so that pretty much is all gonna go to cell phone stipends for employees. 4,000 vehicle maintenance, that line went over by $14,934. And so looking to add, no, I'm sorry, we're over by $8,800. And so I'm looking to bring that up with the cost of new excavator tracks, bring that up to 60 even. So that's an increase of $14,934, with $9,500 of that being for the new rubber tracks for the excavator. We've gotten about 6 years out of those, and so that's they're coming apart. So the rental equipment, we're looking to hold that flat. Underspent that by $3,053, but a lot of that was due to the fact that wasn't able to get we had an employee that was out for a considerable amount of time this past year, so it was difficult for us to pull two crews together to rent another machine to run two crews at the same time, and I'm anticipating that won't happen again this year. So I'd like to hold that flat. Facility maintenance decrease of 2,000, from 12 down to 10, and that is we overspent that this year by $913. I'd like to reduce that by $2,000 as we feel we have some less expensive maintenance items to do this year. Last year, we overhauled the entire rear door of the salt shed, and we had quite a bit of furnace repair and other things that had to get done. This year, we'll be working on the front door of the salt shed, and we have maintenance of our regular garage doors that need maintenance, that they have to come with lifts and go up, and they have specialized equipment to deal with the high-capacity motors and things like that. There's a lot of exterior trim that's rotten, that's gonna have to be replaced. That's pine trim that was put up that wasn't wrapped in metal, that as the water comes off the roof sits on that. That's, the fascia boards and corner boards are really deteriorated, that you can stick your finger through them, and some of the siding is starting to come off, and it's gotta be addressed. And
So you're gonna wrap the new stuff, right?
that's the plan, yeah. Or use the AZAC. So and then we have periodic inspections by Maine Department of Labor. They come through and tell us we've got to make changes, and we always have to jump through some hoops there to put in extra GFIs or replace them or add a light here, or so there's always them coming through that always seem to find something. Tree work, I'd like to add 1,500, get that back up to where it usually was. Cut that last year to get in line with what the select board wanted to fund for the total budget. And so this year we didn't get to the tree work. There wasn't enough to do a project, but I do have a project that does need to be done right off the bat. That's going to chew all that up, that $4,000 that I want to get up to, that I need to get done right off. So training, we overspent that line. I'd like to increase that line by $250 to get that back to pretty much get that up to where that used to be. And you can see we spent $1,006, and now that Maine Local Roads is back up and running, they're going to be offering a lot more classes that they weren't offering so I think 1,000 is stepping in the right direction. Culverts and drains, can decrease that line. I think we've made good headway. Over the years, we had a lot of old rotten metal culverts in town that we pretty much have gotten the majority of them replaced, and with HDPE pipes. So I'd like to cut that by 4,000 down to 5,000. Erosion control, hold that flat. That's grass, fertilizers, jute mat, riprap, erosion control fabrics. So I'd like to hold that where it is. I know we underspent some of that, but the cost of everything is going up considerably. So I think I'd like to keep that where it's at. Signs, I'd like to hold that flat, 4,000. I know we underspent that some, but they're telling me that prices are gonna go up significantly, the cost of steel and other things this year, so I think holding that flat would be reasonable. Safety equipment, I'd like to hold that flat. So it's personal protective equipment, hard hats, safety vests, gloves, safety glasses, cones, barricades, shop safety, things like that. See that we're just about overspent that by $67. Supplies, that is flat. We overspent that by $274. That's office supplies, cleaning supplies, drinking water, paper goods, toiletries, etc. Paving, I'd like to increase that by 25,000. That was another item we cut last year, and there again, we would have gotten more paving done, but due to the labor market, contractors couldn't get enough people together to get the paving. In fact, it was was very late before they could even get a lot of it that they did get done. And so we're in a 3-year contract. There's next year with adjusted pricing for liquid asphalt. We're at about $331, $229. Then we have road striping and crack sealing that's included in there. So, and some of the shoulders didn't get done this year that will end up having to get done, that didn't get done in 22, are gonna end up being passed off to 23. We have a fuel increase of, I'd like to increase that by $4,000. That is called gasoline on here. We spent $36,797. I'd like to increase that to $40. We had a contract in place up until April of last year, and then prices went through the roof, and then they came back down and leveled out. And I think that we are right. I think at 40. I think with now that prices are back down, I think we would be okay at 40,000. Uniform clothing. That is, this uniform clothing, I think I could hold that flat at 1,800, and I know I had 2,000 on here. I noticed that. I think that I would be okay with putting that back to the 1,800. Since I didn't spend it anyway, so I'm willing to put that.
You don't have to negotiate against yourself.
Well, I saw that on here. It said change spreadsheet. I gotta put that back down. So I don't know if I was on the wrong number or what I was doing, but traffic control, flat. I know that we didn't spend that, but there are times I have to have flaggers, and probably I should have taken some out of the labor line and put it on there. Like sometimes I'll have somebody come in to do some flagging on a sharp corner or a vertical curve where we can't safely work without having 2 guys come do some flagging. So I'd like to keep that line funded, as once we are able to hire people, you haven't been able to get any flaggers because the flagging companies just don't have them. So there's a lot of contractors out there working without any flaggers in situations they shouldn't be, but unless you are having flaggers every day, that there's none to be had. Nobody wants the job, and so but that, as the market changes, hopefully we get more back to a normal labor market that'll be available. Professional services decrease. That's engineering, surveying, drug testing, truck diagnostic subscriptions, GP cog, bid fees, etc. I think we're going to need some work on our Mill Pond Bridge and some other road work. I think that last year we spent quite a bit on the stream crossing grants, getting the applications ready for our Army Corps of Engineers. I don't see that happening again, so I'd like to decrease that by $1,789. Liquid de-icers, drop that by a couple of $1,000s. I think that treats about 2,000 tons, and price did go up a little bit, but I've cut back on the number of gallons I'm putting in per ton, and using less of the treated salt when we're in warmer temperatures. So I can make that work at a reduction of a couple of $1,000s. Sand, decrease that by 4,000. I think that based upon what we've been using for sand, and we've been adding stone to it, so it's holding up better, that we can cut that back to 550 yards at $9 a yard, puts us about $5,000. Salt increase, we had a $10 per yard increase in our cost this year. That equates to about $20,000, and we overspent the line by 7. I think a $26,000 increase just holds us, keeps us flat. I have no control over what they tell us we gotta pay. It's a cooperative bid, so all the towns have to pay the same amount. Plow blades decrease by 3,500. I've switched over to some more aggressive cutting edges that I think will wear a little bit better. I think that we should, I'm hoping and thinking that we should be able to get by with just one set this year. That'd be a decrease of 3,500. Winter equipment maintenance increased by 2,000. As you can see, we were over that by about $2,500. I think that's as these trucks are getting older, these trucks have a lot more high-tech equipment on them than the older trucks, and they're starting to cost more to fix. Weather technology, that was eliminated, but Jerry said we couldn't take it off. Because we had to keep it there because it was on there before, I guess, so. I think we dealt with that last year. That's all I got. If you have any questions?
Why was janitorial wages taken off?
It wasn't.
Weather technology was.
There's weather technology at the bottom.
You didn't
Last year that
I remember you said something about janitorial wages, but then I don't remember what you said.
well, it's out of
Oh,
order.
you just moved it.
Yeah, these
Back
don't
page
match.
one.
I got it. Thank you.
So the $90,000 that's unspent goes to undesignated fund? And can that be used to offset this budget this year?
Sure, like, undesignated in general, I would expect, we have a fairly, what we think, at least what the auditor said, we have a fairly healthy balance in undesignated, so one of the part of our recommendation when we forward it on to you will be, when we talk about how the budget would be funded is, here's the estimated revenues, and then we recommend X dollars from undesignated be applied to, this budget to reduce, to offset taxation. But we don't know what that number is yet.
So is this general ledger stuff you gave us, Jerry? And there's at the end, the last page is the fund balances, undesignated fund balance, $2,004,000. Is that real?
It's on paper, yeah. There's no, you don't have the cash.
Say that again?
We don't have the cash. We have it really, it's on paper. This has been really, Kevin might be able to explain it better than me, because I'm still, we have about $4 million in the bank right now to get us through the year. Calvin's got a truck coming. We're gonna have to pay for that truck, and then we're gonna have to take out a tan to pay the light bill. So, the money's on paper.
It's a cash flow thing.
Right,
It's a result of, because we're on a calendar budget cycle, and we don't actually collect revenue against that budget until August. So it's kind of like, for the last 3 months of the year, or 3 or 4 months of the year, we have like way more cash than we need for those 3 or 4 months on hand, but but then other parts of the year, we don't, but it's just a timing issue of when the money
Yeah,
comes.
I get it.
Yes.
So these two fund balances that are here, designated as like fire and public works?
Designated, is that what it says? It just says designated?
Designated fund balances.
Yeah, I think that was in the auditor's definitions, right? That's where, those are accounts that are where there are actual accounts, that have a specific purpose, designated fund balance. Yeah, so those are probably things like, for instance, that might be like where the reserve accounts are, or the town,
Fire reserve,
Yeah.
public works.
yeah,
Exactly.
and the,
ARPA funds?
Old Town Hall, I don't know if ARPA funds are in there, I'm not sure about that.
Well, we'll talk about that, because Heather had a question.
Yeah.
The way your budget is set up and the way we are here with the calendar year, town meeting in April, don't collect taxes again until August. The best time to buy anything is in August, because that's when you have that big influx of cash, and then you hopefully you get through the year with what you got left. It's very different than what I'm used to, so.
I have a couple of questions. I don't have to do them all at once if you don't want me to. This all seems like, Calvin, you're speaking about these numbers that are here, like you're really confident in them, in terms of what has been spent out of the account, and I saw some changes, which I assume is because what Jerry was saying, invoices came in or whatever from when we got the first one. And so I'm wondering if you're the person who inputs this information into, I'm assuming this is from Trio,
No,
for your own
well, when-
department.
Well, once the year-end bills are all submitted and paid, stuff that's outstanding and is coming in, orders that are delivered, and that goes to the office, and then those bills get paid, they go into Trio, and that gives you your actual totals.
Right, are you the one inputting these numbers? Because you're speaking about them very confidently, that's what you spent on salt, or are you trusting that this is, because this is what was put into this line item?
Oh, no, these are actual, this is exactly what I spent.
Okay,
Let me, so,
thank you.
the Trio report that I ran was before he paid all his bills, so if you're trying to compare.
No, that's
He
not.
gave us a new one.
My question is just, is it Calvin that is inputting this, and that's why he's able, do you know what I'm saying? Like how yesterday I said, was this a mistake, because this labor line reads this crazy number, and so then you had to make it make sense in the other lines. I'm wondering if these numbers are accurate, if they have been entered into the right lines correctly, because he knows because he did it, or are there potential errors in these lines, like in
Which-
some of the other reporting?
Which lines are you?
Any of them.
Yeah, I put those in, working with him.
Okay. Is the gasoline, the current gasoline, you said that our contract expired and now we're currently paying $2.67 and $3.97. Is that a contract price?
No.
It's not.
We didn't enter a contract this year because when the contract, we did have a GP cog bid, and at the time the prices were so exorbitant that Mitch and I, the prior town energy suppliers, most times were holding off and not entering in. And the suppliers were suggesting we not enter in because they said they're going to come down. And at the end of the day, they did come down and balance out. They spiked, and we did pay more initially, but then they came down, and we ended up ahead of the game.
Okay. And then with regard to sand, I remember you saying last year that we have been stockpiling sand and you wanted to run that down so that we could determine a baseline. Do you feel like that has happened and that number is reflected in this budget?
Yes, I think this is a good baseline, based on we've gotten rid of the overage and the stockpiles, and the old sand that was all worn out. Some of the edges weren't sharp anymore, so.
Okay,
Yeah.
and then my question about salt, you said about keeping it flat, but the number is $26,000
Oh, I'm
more.
sorry.
Is that, do you mean flat in the amount that we're using, but the price has gone up?
No, that was a mistake.
Oh.
That was a mistake on my part, because I went back and did change it, because I had to twist Jerry's arm to raise it. So, originally, I was gonna leave it flat, but once they explained that, it went up it's out of my control. I can't, if they go up $20,000, I gotta pay it, so.
Okay, I just wanted
Even if we
I
hold-
just wanted to understand the flat. I didn't know if it was the
Did I-
amount and the
did
price
I-
had gone up, or,
Did I
but
not change
that
that?
answers that question, so thank you.
It says increase here.
And then, when you were talking about the flaggers,
Oh, she-
are there safety requirement or training or whatever that flaggers need to have, and so they have to come from a specific place?
Well, we go to the main local roads classes put on. There was some cost for that. It's about $300 and something for all of us to go. But we also have videos that we watch.
But does a person have to have some kind of safety training to be, part of me is, my wheels are always turning, where there's like, let's say some high school kids that if they were, I'm like, Jane, vouch for my kid, he flagged for your trees all, for Christmas
I
weekend.
get that, but the liability to the
Well, that's why
town is
that's what I was
different.
asking. I was just asking if it meant not holding off work that needs to be done because you can't get flaggers, is there potential to hire kids that live in Durham that could maybe take a safety training class or whatever to do that job?
That would be a Jerry question.
So they don't need to be certified. They only need to be certified when they work on DOT roads. I would be careful about hiring kids out with the traveling public, because they're responsible for the safety of the people in that vehicle.
Okay.
So they don't have to be certified, but they do have to be trained.
Right, okay.
So employees have to be trained, and so we have a video that we get from DOT that everybody has to watch, and the guy's on the screen, and you go through the whole thing like you're in class. So we do that, but we also like to go to the actual classes, so there's more interactive.
Okay, and then my one other thing, and maybe there's gonna be more, but this is actually two things. Number one, we all shared concerns around the idea of undesignated going back into the general, or unspent funds rather, going into the general undesignated, and that's why the budget committee did the funding of the articles the way that we had always done it in the past. And I just want to commend you, Calvin, for not spending part of the concern was like, they're going to have this money and they're just going to spend every penny of it if they know that it's just going to lapse back into undesignated and not go to their specific department. So I want to take this opportunity to commend you on not spending $90,000 of your budget, knowing that it wasn't going directly back into your budget. So thank you for that. And then, you know, last year was my first year on this committee, and I spent time in the meeting, which is probably why we all got out really early at the last meeting, making suggestions about how to reduce some of the costs. And I'm not going to do that now, other than the fact to say, I noticed in the explanation there's an employee cell phone stipend, and I brought up last year that I add my employees to my cell phone plan. And that's cost substantially less than giving a stipend for a cell phone. And I don't know if the town has looked at that as a potential option, but it might be worth exploring.
So we're only paying like $20 a month toward their phone, because we figured, well, you're using it some of the time for work, but most of the time you're using it for personal use, so it was less expensive this way.
Okay,
So they're not paying the whole cell phone bill for.
right. Okay, thank you. That's all I have right now.
Kevin, I got just a simple question, and you may not be able to answer, I apologize if you can. With the plowing that was scheduled for, excuse me, the paving that was scheduled for 2022, is that gonna go on to 2023? Would that be the priority? And with that said, will you be able to accomplish the 22-23 paving in your estimation this year? And the only reason why I ask that is, if not, would they honor that? Because all those contracts were budgeted off of that number based on the contract. That contract was obviously gonna lapse, and it's gonna be probably a pretty significant increase. Is that something that you feel confident in, that we can get the 2022 and the 23 done, or at the minimum, say, hey, you guys couldn't get to this in 2022, would you at least honor these roads at this contract price prior to the new contract?
Well, in some of it we just couldn't afford to do, because liquid asphalt prices went way up with fuel, and so there had to be some cuts in there, and then some of it, you know, they couldn't get to, but that's certainly worth, I mean, I can ask them and see if they do that.
Can I speak up?
Yeah, please.
So, in paving, he's got a price, what was it, 75, 50, that was signed back in March of 2021. When liquid asphalt was $552. It's up to $665 now, which is $100 and something more. I showed Calvin today how to figure that. So when you figure that liquid asphalt, it's like 6.2% of the liquid is in the pavement. You have to take that 150 times it by that 6%. Whatever that number is, gets added to that per ton price. So it's no longer $75.50. It's like 86 something or to that effect. So I just put that out there to you, because if you know that price, it isn't really the price now. That's the danger of sort of getting into a 3-year contract, because you don't know what that price is gonna be. You have a plan, and I told this to many people in my workshops. You plan your work, you work your plan, and if you're out there that far and now you can't afford it, you know, Mrs. Jones is going, well, you said you were gonna pave my road, well, you ran out of money, now you can't do it, and it just raises doubt with in the eyes of the
Well,
residents.
that never happens.
You know, so I just caution you on that things ain't as black and white as they seem, you know, lots of things happen, so, yeah.
I do recall Calvin, when he explained it, the way my brain remembered it is, we're under a contract for the roads, but the price of the asphalt isn't
There's an escalation,
included in
correct.
this contract.
And we don't contract, like, the 22 contract didn't say these roads at this price.
Right.
It was for
So many
the
miles.
material,
It's a
essentially.
set, yeah, but it's a set price for, with escalators in regards
Right,
to the.
right.
Well, my real question was, where my concern is the labor market. It's not on, I know the liquid asphalt is already in the contract as an escalating, or actually.
Or de-escalates too,
de-escalates.
but that probably.
Yeah, it's not a set price, it's a market price, along with other things. But the actual labor component is where my biggest concern is, because that's probably where we're gonna see the biggest jump in that contract.
Yeah, I mean, it is trending downward, and so I'm
What's
gonna
that?
try.
The laborers?
No, I mean, the liquid asphalt.
Right.
It's trending down, so.
From last summer.
Right, I mean, it was up to 900 and something.
Right, so what's kinda scary though, at this time of year, having it be 665, when there's really no demand, and the supply's up there, when that demand kicks in, I expect that liquid to go up even more. So, we'll see. This is all crystal ball stuff, we don't really know, but, you certainly can't do as much as you anticipate when you have a set price and you don't take that escalator into account. There have been times that I've seen when the price has actually gone down and towns have gotten a reduction in the, because it also de-escalates. It's really fair for both. It's fair for the customer and it's fair for the contractors. So I just do that.
No, I appreciate that. So by that rationale, what did we use for a variable or for a number to make this? How many road miles did we use to make this number?
2.47,
And is that set at like X for X for, liquid asphalt, et cetera? Did we come up with a number for that, or we just ballpark?
No, I had the engineer adjust it for this year based on what the liquid asphalt prices were and what the contractor told me he thought they would be at this coming year.
Oh, okay. So we have an idea of what they're gonna be, what are we gonna be looking at compared to what we were last year?
Adjusted it at 331, and I think our old contract was, our original price was, I don't think I have the old one here, but he's got it set at like 331. So if you take the 331 and then we add the crack sealing and the line striping, I think 375 is a good number to try to get it all done.
And that's 2.1 miles of road?
2.47.
Is that which, that sounds a little bit lower than I remember in terms of, we try to do X, if we do X number of miles per year on a 10-year cycle, then we're touching every road every 10 years.
Yeah, and what happened with that was, we had figured that you're gonna be rebuilding a road every 30 years, so you'd have to take that out of the equation. And say, if you're gonna be rebuilding one, you don't wanna be considering it for repaving, so there's always gonna be roads that are being rebuilt.
Well, you do in year 10 and year 20, before you get to 30, right?
Yeah, so if you took that out, if you did a road every 30 years, I'm trying to remember back now, that basically is like 12 miles every 10 years. That you're,
For rebuilds.
yeah, so that brings your number from like 3 or 4, from like 4 miles down to.
What about shim and overlay slash, just the basics, not the rebuilds?
Yeah, that's what I'm
Right.
talking
That's what I thought I was talking about, too, just the basics, just talking about basics. Cause that 2.41, that's not a rebuild, that's just a,
That's just shim and overlay. These are all
That's just
shim
shim and
and
overlay.
overlay.
Yeah, 'cause
Shim and overlay.
It should be a while before we need a rebuild because
Correct.
of all the bonding work we did. So I think that's where we were coming with the, okay, so now we've rebuilt everything that needed to be rebuilt via the bonds, and that now the idea was that the operational paving budget, doing X number of miles per year, would keep everything on schedule so that then now we're doing rebuilds of roads, as you said, like every 30 years. And obviously, things change, and one road might be 27, another might be 32 or
It's an
something like
average.
that, but,
It's an average.
but does that, Because I think,
It's
I think
right
we
around.
wanna make sure is that over the long haul, that, you know, as the price of materials and contracts and everything changes, that we're funding the paving line adequately to keep up with the, you know, shim overlay maintenance paving before we get to a rebuild situation.
Right. But,
What did we get in for mileage last year? How many?
mileage,
Or as far as how many miles did we get done?
I would think I looked at, last year, what did we get done?
Versus how many miles were done versus how many miles were planned? Let's go that way again.
I don't have last year's on this, I have next year's on this, but I don't have last year's on.
All right, thanks, Ken.
I just, when it comes to roads, I just wanna speak up. One thing in municipality that really, and they've done this a lot across the state, is, and they spend a lot of money on roads, they spend $1 million on roads, they turn their back on them, and they don't maintain them. So you spend all that money, but then you don't turn around and maintain that money. I mean, the town of Durham has spent all that money getting your roads nice. Now we do maintenance, pave them, and keep them that way. And if you do that, they'll last a lot longer than 30 years. You don't wanna be getting into the rebuilding roads thing. That's a waste of money. There's a lot of different things you can do to maintain the roads, and I'll work with Calvin on that.
Yeah, great. And that's just it, we just wanna make sure that,
That's the point I was trying to make,
Right.
that we're meeting our
Right.
paving schedule
Right.
that we outlined
Right.
when we did these rebuilds and
Right.
spent, because we shot the hell out of $1 million.
Absolutely.
So we wanna make sure that we're following up on that
Right.
and doing what we promised.
Okay.
Worst thing you can do is spend $1 million to build them and no money to maintain it.
Right.
That's just.
Yeah.
And that's what we put a very aggressive plan together to make sure we're doing that, so.
Oh, we did, I just wanted to make sure, the reason for my question was to make sure that we're meeting, for lack of better words, the mileage that it's gonna take to maintain the road at the rate that we originally anticipated when we took out these massive road bonds to rebuild.
Right.
And we're very fortunate that we did it when we did, when interest rates were like.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Under 2%.
No question, no question, no question.
Okay. Anybody, yeah, John?
Labor, it's 5%. This is not a comment on whether it's good or not, but it's 5% in here. It was hard to tell with the chief because he's moving FICA and a whole bunch of other stuff around. Is that sort of the town's guidance, and is that a good labor increase, given the market?
Yeah, I'm gonna go into that with my stuff, cause
I'll wait.
since the last meeting and looking at things, we'll talk about that.
I will wait patiently.
Any other public works questions, comments?
I might have one, hold on.
What are you, advertising for questions?
No, I had, after our meeting, I had sent Jill a text pointing something out and I didn't write it.
It was the summer labor.
Yes, so I don't know where it is now in this. That was what I was gonna do, is try to find the line so I could refer to it, but there's, I think it's under expense, but I'm not certain. It says that summer road repair and maintenance payroll was $224,800, but the total labor line for public works was $274,800, and I'm just wondering how we only paid $50,000 in labor outside of summer labor. It obviously has to be a mistake. That's why I'm asking if we're confident in the numbers that are on this, because it's hard to make an informed decision if these things aren't reading correctly. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, if just the summer labor line, it says summer roads repair and maintenance payroll was $224,800, but the total line for public works labor was $274,800.
Where's that number coming? I don't see that.
Okay, I'll find it. Go on without me and I'll find it and then I'll come back, okay?
Just take it and pass it.
Any other,
Kelly?
okay, so thank you, Calvin. And Heather, you'll have other opportunity to
Yep,
follow up with
yep.
Calvin on that. So,
Yep.
Just gonna pass those to Scott, just because they were questioning, just taking
I guess when they updated the paving plan,
Where did I see
they were
it?
taking off last year's stuff.
It would have been based based on his,
The answer to your question is what, 275,
there are no
2.75?
summer roads, winter roads.
Kevin,
No, it was in a specific report.
yep.
What? Oh, yes, Al.
I'd like to ask a question now,
Yeah.
a general question about Union Church. I know that the select board has had a lot of discussion about the deterioration in the Union Church, and is there any plan of possibility of relocating, or, you know, if we continue to put money into a rabbit hole, that's what, it seems like that's what we've been doing over the past few years, because it's deteriorated so much. What is the status of that discussion?
I think, the status of that is honestly similar to where it was last year at this time, is that
I think Ian's taking care of
we
it.
think a
Yeah, I
committee
got
needs
that
to be
actually.
formed to look at that and talk about what is the long-term, what does the town wanna do with that building long-term? Like, and is it something that the town wants to keep investing money in, or not? If they do, what are some of the options? Like, you mentioned relocate, I mean, some people have, cause one of the problems with the building where it is now is, even if you fixed it up, there's not much you can do with it, cause there's no parking or anything like that there.
Right.
No, yeah, so some people have said, well, maybe we should move it over to, this complex here where we own the land and whatever, so that could be an option, but, I think we need to go before the town, probably with a series of public meetings and a committee with people that are engaged and can look at, options and things of that sort. I mean, so I think in the short term, there really is no plan for that building. I mean, we are obligated, we think, to, at least keep it from deteriorating, so like if something needed to be done with the foundation, we did that, or the roof, or a broken window. It's kinda like we're in break-fix mode right now, I guess you would say. If something that needs to be addressed to keep it watertight, we do it, but we're not investing any money beyond that at this point.
One other question on opera funds, are they gonna be a separate article?
By law, they have to be, so like, just like on the special town meeting, if something's going to be ARPA funded, it'll be like that on the warrant, as to use ARPA funds.
So the determination of those funds will be addressed at the April meeting? Not
Maybe
pri-
not all of them.
not prior to.
Correct. Well, the only thing prior to is, what the board will decide is what to put before the voters on how to spend the ARPA money. The
Okay.
town can always say no.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions before we turn it back over to Jerry?
All right, thank you, sir. I've handed you out some stuff, we'll just pick them off easy, the easy ones at a time. You got your debt service thing, not much to talk about there, it's a set schedule. Not much we do here, is what it is. I just wanted you to have it so you could, you could, well, because you wanted it, and I should have included it the first time, but I didn't. And I apologize for that. Thanks, Dave. Let's look at telecom. That was one that I didn't include before. So I wanna wrap that up, and then we'll just go back to the fire and the administration part, and we'll look at those.
We didn't have telecom.
Where's telecom?
It's
was
coming,
only-
sorry, I filed.
Coming around.
Got stuck on there.
Wah!
I know, right?
Sorry.
It's all right, we're used to it.
Okay.
It was only on the computer when they're sending it.
Yeehaw.
That's yours. Pass that.
Okay. All right, so let's go down and review this. It's my understanding, before my time, that there was a full-time employee that worked the telecom, or there was a?
Part-time.
It was a part, was it?
There was a part-time, telecom, public information technician, and then there was a part-time secretary. And then for a period of time, those two positions were kind of combined
Okay.
in one person, so.
Okay. But they were a full-time employee? Because there was,
Technically, yeah.
all right, so if you look through your budgets and add up where the meeting secretary and the public information officer, meeting secretary was spread out all through the budget. And then there was a, information officer, if you add those up, the budget for that was 26,300. I reduced it down to 25. And telecom, you're looking at them right there. They do a super job. The access channel, we're considering getting rid of this. Where we're streaming, I don't know what the town would like to do with it. I don't think many people are watching it. So this is one you could cut if you wanted to, I think. It's up to the board.
Yeah, remember, we don't know what legal obligations we might have to keep the channel, or if it's part of the Comcast contract or what. I think we need to look at if we can, stop it. I agree that it's like having a typewriter to write your stuff. It's just like, it's just done. It's old technology.
I like that.
But the older people in town, maybe
No,
not looking
that-
at a computer versus.
I would disagree with that. Even the elderly people, I mean, there's almost nobody that doesn't have, email or something at this point now. It really isn't.
I have a question about it. When you have Comcast, it has a channel, like how, ESPN or CNN or whatever, you can go to the Durham channel, like in your channel guide.
Yeah.
If a person, I don't have Fidium, is that how you say it?
Video.
But I know that a lot of people in town are now switching over to that. And so if you have them as a service provider, can you still access the public channel?
I don't.
No?
You can exit, I switched over to Fidium. I know a lot of people in my area have too. A lot of that comes through YouTube TV, which this is on YouTube. So
Right.
therefore you can access it.
No, we're talking about accessing the actual
actual
live.
Durham
Oh,
channel.
the
Fidium's
live.
just-
You can see
Fidium's
all
just in
those,
there.
all those compelling slides that come up.
What did
the
you say?
Christmas
Mel?
music.
Fidium is just internet access, it's not cable.
Right.
Oh, I see. Oh, so people don't, so if you don't have, so Alan, I'm gonna call on you because you have them. They're your internet service provider, but you watch TV through like YouTube TV. You don't watch through,
That's correct,
okay.
streaming.
Or you don't even get any of it. I mean, we just get streaming.
Yeah, that's the
And then
thing.
a little plastic antenna. We
A
hang
lot
up.
of communities, like I know, like Freeport, they stopped their local access channel, and a lot of communities are.
I just wondered if the majority of residents were going to switch over to the new internet service provider because it is such substantially cheaper, that how many people would then still be accessing it if they're no longer using Comcast
right,
as
yeah,
their
even fewer, right,
internet or
yeah.
cable provider.
I don't know if you'd be able to access it
Right.
I don't
You
think
can't.
Fidium offers cable television.
Right, right,
So-
that's what they're saying, there's
Yeah.
just, so I think anybody who does switch over now, we're just left with the population in town that is using Comcast still as an internet
I
provider.
think that's probably true.
And I don't know how to vet that out to determine how many people would actually have access, but
You could probably find out when you meet with them. Are we already
Fidium would probably tell you.
Comcast?
Fidium would probably tell you how many people.
We're
switched
at
over.
TV,
because of
we'll
that.
past that, right?
What
Can I
is
just
We get
see it on my
Comcast
end?
internet,
I don't know, I think
we don't
we
get
still got
TV,
Comcast.
so,
I do too.
yeah, it has to be.
I didn't know we could.
Right.
switch
That's
to
the
TV.
theory.
So,
we
anyway,
know.
for the
Right.
purposes of tonight, it's something that we're looking
Yeah.
at, so we can keep going.
So the next two lines, so we're on a per diem rate with BEK, data defined, I'm not sure how you remember them. So there was two lines, one for emails and one for services. They do both. So really what I did was I just combined them, services and emails into one line, just for the accounting part of it. So I just zeroed out the emails and just put it into the services for 15 grand.
Can I ask a question now?
Yeah.
I thought at the last meeting you stated because of the new hire, you were gonna no longer use BEK and use the new hire.
Oh,
Did I misunderstand?
no, BEK backs up all of our files, they do the server, we need that specialized AT. The lady in the office, instead of calling BEK to fix the problems, like if the drivers aren't working and the printers aren't working and this, and it's all through the Trio, she can call Trio and get it resolved much more efficient. It's cheaper than calling, you call BEK, when they pick up that phone, it's $50.
Right, so I guess that's my question, is that reflected in the budget?
Hmm?
No, that's just a normal, back office helper.
No, I guess my question is, we've had to budget BEK in the past for their backup options and the things that they're doing behind the scene, but a big chunk of it has been the per diem calls that we've made into it as well.
It does add to it. We pay like $8.29 a month for BEK for the emails, for them to make sure that no one's hacking our system and all that stuff. And then we call them when something doesn't work and nobody's there to fix it. We have Cindy do it because she actually worked for a computer company, so.
So we're not aware then of how much savings that's going to be in the end?
Oh, no, there's no way to know.
No, I was just
Right,
curious
right,
if,
right. This-
if we've
'cause
normally
again,
give
these are
them
all-
20 grand
These are all
a year
forecasted
calling
numbers.
BEK. That's what I was just asking.
Yeah, I mean,
She's doing stuff that Ruth used to do all the time. This is not anything new, really.
No, Ruth wasn't
never
doing
did
that. No
Ruth was
way.
not- Ruth was not a technical person.
Not at all.
Well, they had people in there that messed with computers.
They sure did.
1-800
We're paying for it now.
Oh, man.
So I removed the workman's comp because our telecom people, they're vendors, they're not really employees, so we don't have to cover their workman's comp or anything. So I just took it right out where before they were covered. That's why I asked in the beginning if they were employees, and apparently they were because we covered their. So, and I just left the training the way it is in case they wanted to do some training or whatever. And hardware, I just kind of left it the same. You never know what you might need. Software, same thing. Supplies, 500. Printing, I think that's for the annual report for the most part. The website expense, I breezed right over that. So, Kimberly, we're using like this Drupal 8, is that what it is?
Drupal 7.
Drupal 7.
Which is phasing out at the end of this fall of 2023.
Right, so then we're getting into this Drupal 9, which is gonna be more expensive. So we bumped that up to 3,000. Do you remember what they quoted us, like 2,500,
We're at
270?
2,000 a year right now, it's going up to 2,500.
2,500,
An increase of 500.
okay. And they haven't reached out lately, or did,
Just letting us know what our options were, if we
Yeah.
wanted to change.
yeah. Because we were looking at a more robust,
Yeah, and it was
you wouldn't like that price, but it was awesome because you could do polling. I mean, there was all kinds of nice things, but you folks would never latch onto that, no way. So I didn't even propose.
Well, give me an idea because this is something near and dear to my heart.
Okay. Kimberly, do you remember what he said for a
Yeah,
price?
between 15,000 to 25,000 to set up and migrate to this new fancy setup, and then it would be annually. It was 5,000 to 7,000 annually after the first year setup price.
Okay, and does that, so one of the things that we had talked about was that you can't yourselves go in and post and make changes to the website, correct? That has to be done by,
You have to get a ticket, well, there's certain things that I can access, some things that I can't. I can change the background photo on our main page, but I cannot change our hours. I have to make a ticket, call them, and I think that I
Something
can,
simple.
and they make that change. So I'm trying to change that. When we switched, that was one of the questions I on the website myself without having to call them, because I feel like I can handle that, I'm pretty sure I can do it. So that's something that I'm trying to work in when we get ready to make the change from Drupal 7 to Drupal 9.
So the calendar updates, you can manage that part. It's the fixed things.
Yeah, you know, basically, the header and the footer, I can't control those, and that's on our main page, like where our town hours are, or, you know, the phone numbers, the seal, that I have to send to them and they manipulate it, I can't.
Cause that's part of the page template.
Yeah.
Okay.
We basically can control content, but not layout.
Okay.
So we can upload like news announcements, we can upload all of the agendas and minutes to where they go. We just can't dictate how it will look on the website.
Okay, so if that doesn't end up being part of the process of things that it might be worth, I mean, we changed hours a lot last year. It might be worth making hours a tab, the way departments is a tab, where people can choose so that you could update that, if that doesn't go away. I agree that expense for the fancy website is a lot, and the annual expense of that is equally a lot, but we'll talk about that later. One of the questions that can I ask one more question?
Oh, sure.
One of the questions that I had was that when we bought the new computers, or we're in the process of buying the new computers with the ARPA funds that were allocated towards this, there was a lot of conversation about BEK uploading all of the software to the computers. They were gonna take care of all of that. And so I'm wondering, that fee that you're talking about for the $829, that's the monthly fee assessed to monitor all of those things, and not related to the initial costs to set up the computers. Is that
Right,
accurate?
Right,
Okay,
yeah, and it includes the emails.
okay.
And so, and then if you call for a problem, depending on how long you're on the phone, that's in addition to that $829.
Okay, and so having this person that you're suggesting going from part-time to full-time, that phone call doesn't necessarily need to happen, that's something that she would be able to do in-house?
Yeah, first person that's gonna try to resolve it is the person in the office. Like I said, when the other day, when we switched over to those computers and tried to print registrations, they didn't print. We got on the phone actually with BEK, who was trying to get in touch with Trio, and they said, we'll get back to you. I don't know how long it was, but it was 3-4 hours. But we just had Cindy call up Trio, and it's fixed in 10 minutes. So it's not that BEK charges for that 4 or 5, we just weren't hearing it, they just couldn't register any
Right.
vehicles.
No, that's,
print out, so-
yeah, I understand.
And so Cindy's very good. I mean, for a couple of years, she worked at Burgess Computer, which is just another BEK, just a different name. So she's very good at that stuff, so.
The website, the Drupal thing, is that, I know that a lot of municipalities' websites look the same. Is this something is that the reason we're choosing this, or have you looked at other service providers?
Drupal is behind the scenes. It's Civic Plus is who we use, and a lot of municipalities will use Civic Plus. If you go on their page and you look down, it'll tell you who they're using. So we looked at a lot of
Okay,
websites.
so Civic Plus, where does that expense come in? I think that's the part of the thing that I'm interested in upgrading, is the Civic Plus side of things,
Well,
not necessarily who the service provider
that
is.
is the website.
That is the service
That
provider.
is. That's the
Civic Plus
website
is,
expense.
so what's the Drupal?
What operates.
That's the platform, it's
right.
like a software update, it goes from version 7 to version 9.
I see, okay.
Jerry, I have a couple of questions.
Line 1008, is that these two folks right here? We see the public,
Yes.
the line 1008?
Yeah, they're right here, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. They're basically part-time, they only come in, when do you come in for the most part, Wednesdays? Well, I'll tell you, there's a lot of folks out there that would see more activity on that website. She's part-time, so if you wanna I don't think she wants full-time, but I mean, the more you want, the more she needs to be there to do it, for the most part.
So forgive me, maybe you said, why is it going up that much?
Because they're going from Drupal 7 to,
No, no, 2008.
where?
Line
The first line.
Coming from other lines.
That's all coming from other lines. It's actually going down, Neil.
The meeting secretary used to be in a different article.
They were all over the budget. They were in the planning, they were over here, they were over there, and I'm just condensing it down to one line so it's easier for accounting. Because we need some help with the accounting.
Couple questions,
So what
please.
you're saying is.
Hold on,
Okay.
Order,
no.
please.
No,
Order.
Milt was first.
I've been
Milt
waiting.
has the
Okay,
floor.
I apologize.
Jeez. So just.
Control your committee over there,
Trying.
will ya?
With regards to the labor, even though they're part-time, so they, FICA and Medicaid doesn't apply?
No, they're vendors, yeah, so
They're-
it doesn't apply.
They're considered vendors?
Yeah, they're
Okay.
vendors, not employees.
Other question, do you know what the 2023 franchise fees will be?
Excuse me, what?
Do you know what the 2023 franchise,
How could you know
how much
that
we're
in
gonna
advance?
collect from franchise fees?
I would go for the 2022 revenue
Okay.
and see
So-
what that is, because I
And
don't.
just, remember,
well,
we've,
just
we've kind of moved on from the franchise fees pays for all of telecom, because as you've heard tonight, fewer and fewer people use Comcast, franchise fees are trending down, but telecom expense is not trending down.
Right.
So whenever we do collect the franchise fees will be applied to, the budget, but it won't cover, probably won't cover all of telecom.
So
I-
is there
I have-
a
wait,
video
what-
one? Sorry.
Excuse me. Just, one of the things that's built up the telecom budget is because we weren't at one time spending all the money, so we tried to find creative ways to, and one of them was the annual report. The annual report, that used to be covered in a different account, and it was just a couple of years ago, I think, two or 3 years ago, that we said, why not move that to telecom, because it's a
Yeah, that
communication
sounds,
mechanism.
that rings a bell.
So, I guess it probably doesn't, it's gonna, if money has to be raised, it has to be raised anyway, so I'm not I know like Jerry's trying to label things better. If the telecom account was designed to offset franchise fees, and I don't know if we need to relook at it, and if something, for example, the annual report needs to go back to where it originally was, so that franchise fees are paying for what they were intended to be paid for, as opposed to our having become creative the last few years and are raising money, now have to raise money because the franchise fees won't cover everything.
Well, I think that's fair, but I guess I would also add that I think the scope of telecommunications article has grown. It's not just about, what the franchise fees used to cover. It's really kind of a larger scope in terms of like communication, really. So that's why you're seeing things like, mailings and town reports and things like that in this kind of like, public communication type of an article. And like, to your point, I mean, if you could move the printing from this article into like, say, administration, but it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other, because remember this year we're doing things a little bit differently, where we're taking all the revenues in one lump sum and applying them to the budget as a whole. We're not doing this revenue goes against this article and this revenue goes against the other one. It's all getting pooled, so it's not as much of an issue maybe now as maybe it has been in the past in terms of mapping those things together.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, Joe.
Back to your comment about 108. So am I understanding correctly then the 2022 budget, only that amount, the $20,000 only reflects the public information officer and not the meeting secretary?
I can't, I don't know what that, I don't know really what that represents.
So
To be-
your
I mean-
25,000 was the sum you came up with, adding up all the other lines?
Yeah, Yeah, and that sum was 26,300.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, because there was a public information officer and the meeting secretary. Those are mother and son right there. So I just combined them, and the work that they do is gonna come out of this one line. They're gonna get paid out of that one line.
So the secretary taking notes for like the planning department, that's them now,
Yes.
not,
Yeah. I'm trying to like clean up the budget and the accounting and the lines to make it actually,
More intuitive.
or just make more sense to me. Because it's been confusing. I'm gonna try and revamp the whole thing, so you'll probably be surprised next year when you see it. No, seriously though, and I wanna make it a little bit better so we can understand it. There really should only be 3 departments, right? You got the general government, you got public works, and you got fire. Well, we all have office supplies, we all have wages, we all do fuel. So that's really how it should be like, because we budget by department. If you look at most budgets out there, it's really by the department. Public Works will definitely have a bigger budget because, the town office isn't gonna buy salt, they're not gonna buy sand, so you won't see that in the administration budget, but you'll see office supplies, and you'll see FICA and all of them, and just better, and like Calvin's utilities budget includes fuel. No, fuel is its own thing, and under fuel you have propane, gasoline, and everything, so you can keep a better track of actually what you're using. If you call me up and say, well, how much did we have in gasoline? I gotta go to his utility lines and sit there for 15 minutes and try to figure out where it all is, add it all up, where if you do it right, it's just one click of the mouse and boom, there it is. So that's the sort of stuff that I am gonna try to clean up for us to make it better, and I think you'll like it. It'll be one more layer, actually. It'll be like I said, we just have 2 layers now, so it'd be like town government, fuel, and under fuel will be propane, heating oil. Right now, it's just fuel. Well, what fuel? So that's what I'm trying to, that's what I would like to do. Well, it's not what I like to, it's what I'm gonna do. So, 'cause it's just, I wanna be more, it's more transparent, I think, in what we're spending our money on, and easier for accounting, so. Any more questions on that? All right, so the small stuff, so Heather had asked a question about permits. I just handed it around. Alan always does this for me. He already had this printed out. Wanted to know what we had for permits, and one thing that's not on there, because he didn't do it, and I didn't make those. It's also a question about subdivisions. There's been one application, and there's one that's amended. That's, the application hasn't gone through yet, he's still working on it. So,
2 this year.
No, there's one that he's amended. I don't know if that happened this year, but he said there's one that's there that we're amending, and there's one.
Well, there's one, that Brown was amended, it's completed. Deer Creek filed their money last year, so I don't know that he would track that or George would track that.
Well, they really work close together, so that's why he doesn't include it on his reports to me, on what he does.
Yeah, it's not a lot of money.
Right.
We don't charge enough, but that's another topic.
Yeah.
That's what I was asking under the revenue for subdivision fees and whatnot. I was wondering in the escrow, and there was one other line that applied to that. I was wondering how many had been filed to make up those numbers.
I think it was that one new one, right?
Two last year.
Yeah.
That were filed and should have paid fees, to this point.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know,
Thank you.
Heather, if that answers your question.
Thanks.
All right, so then let's move on to the updates, to the 'cause I said, yeah, well, I said we would, well, I'll get fire out of the way, cause that's easy, cause there's only one line item change, so. I am proposing, raises, I handed out to you what other towns are looking at. That's just there for your information, but I'm gonna propose 5%. Okay. Huh? Labor, for wages, yeah. And so, that's what changes the chiefs. He goes from 73.5 to 77.175 if you wanna, yep.
So it's only the chief that's
Yes.
getting the 5%,
Yeah.
not the,
Yeah, I asked him
employees.
if that happens, he said, no, it's just me, so. He's right there, right? You can ask,
Screw my.
so.
When did I get to weigh in on this one? What's the question?
My brain heard there's gonna be a 5% increase in wages for the fire department, but then when I looked at the spreadsheet, I saw it was reflective just under, fire rescue chief salary and not reflective under labor, so.
So, thank you, Jill, it's a great question. 17 members, which is half my roster, just got a $1 raise, $1.05 because of minimum wage. So, half the department just got it because we pay them minimum. The other half last year got a 5% raise because of the wording on the ballot or at the warrant was, do you wanna give the fire department members a 5%? Because I think there's still a question on a wage pool and how that's all gonna work out. And now that we have some strong leadership, I think he's working on all of that. But last year at town meeting, a 5% was given out to the fire department specifically. So I got a 5% and I did pass it on to every member. Well, like I said, currently, and that was, I think I was here less than a year, but it would have been a whole another 2 years, before, 2.5 years before I got a raise. They're not common, they're not negotiated in my part, I have a contract, but that was just a starting contract, so there's nothing in there about, like a term limit, and there's nothing about renegotiating the contract, and there's nothing about pay raises. So, again, I default to, the way Durham was doing it, you're more of an expert about pool, you know, or merit, or all that. Currently, I did see he did this, which he did it on his own, it puts me over $500,000, I'm kinda pissy about it. That's a visual, I have a solution for that. I have a different solution, to answer your question, currently that's just me, I mean, half the members did get a raise, and if we figure out a raise pool, or town voters wanna do that, I'll be happy to give it to them. Cause you're right, it doesn't include my part-time.
Okay, thank you.
So last year the chief got a raise he wasn't expecting. So if you get some pushback on this year, that might be why.
Okay,
We give out a raise to anybody, don't we usually get pushed back? Typically.
okay, so, when we were here on Tuesday night, I told you I wanted to talk about raises. This raise pool, this is one of the first times I've ever heard of a raise pool. Typically, raises are reflected in the salary because that's where they come from, and it's a much easier way to account for them. For instance, if the and maybe I just don't understand, but if you have a wage pool, when you pay the salary, you pay 95% out of the salary line and 5% out of the wage pool. How does that work? It's a rhetorical question, I really don't need an answer, but it's like perplexing to me.
I think a wage pool is more based so that you were able to give a merit raise versus a cost of living raise. Right?
Well,
So
that's part of
you
it.
get to choose which employees, I think what we were, in years past, it's not a matter of everybody doesn't get a raise if they don't deserve a raise.
Well, let's
You know
talk,
what I mean?
let's talk about that too, because I think when you talk merit, I mean, that was that way when the state where I worked, up there was 600 employees. So let's run down the employees that I'm gonna be giving merits to. He's one of them. So what would we base that merit on? He's
I don't
got a
know,
cer-
that's your
he-
job.
He's, well,
It's
he's
not
got,
mine,
well,
right?
I'm gonna educate you. He's got his certifications. He belongs to the associations. He's doing his job, so does he go get a master's degree now and then that's what he gets his raise on? I mean, if he's doing a good job, he's gonna get his raise. There's nothing more I can ask him to do for his professional development for him to get one.
I don't think we're talking department heads, I'm thinking we're talking more.
I
So-
think in the past, Jerry, just because
Yeah.
you weren't here,
Yeah.
we did it as a wage pool because it was kind of a scale. Like some employees might be entitled because of maybe longevity, maybe a 4% increase. Some employees might not have been there that long. They might have only got a 2%. Or maybe some employees were needed a performance review that necessarily so they could maybe achieve a higher raise or something of that nature. So the wage pool was set up so everybody wasn't just a flat 3%.
Right, and I think,
No, that's correct, and the other reason we did the pool was to eliminate, those who've been around for a while, you know, there were times at town meeting where there would be an open debate on an individual, on a raise for an individual. You know, and so we really,
Right.
that was really the main reason that I brought the raise pool idea up, was to stop doing that. And then it has other things too. But admittedly, it is a strategy that is typical of larger organizations in the private sector. It's not a typical way in the municipal sector that you would, that increases are handled. Typically, in the municipal sector, it's kind of in two, and check me if I get this wrong here, but there's kind of two ways. There is a COLA. I mean, COLA is a fact of life in the municipal sector. And it's largely because a lot of it is unionized, even though we aren't, but kind of the benchmark out there is COLA. And then there's occasionally, for if there's something extraordinary that happens, there might be, you know, a merit increase on top of that. So, but I think this year, you know, what Jerry's looking at is, because, you know, he's got a lot of work he wants to do on the structure of pay increases and pay schedules and things of that sort. But this year, I think he's looking for that kind of across the board, you know, 5%, not merit-based, but more COLA-based. And that's really, you know, ultimately that's his call, working with the board to kind of, you know, for him to come to the table with his philosophy of compensation and how he will manage that and what the criteria will be. And he has said he's got a lot of work he wants to do on that. So.
I'm just gonna give you my philosophy on merit increases, or giving somebody a raise or not giving somebody a raise. I don't like to withhold a raise for disciplinary action. That just lowers the morale even more for that employee if he's having a problem. If that employee's having a problem, you don't address it at a performance appraisal. Performance appraisals I'm all about, because I believe those are more about professional development. But if somebody's having an issue and you're waiting until the performance appraisal, you're not doing your job. So you address that through other means, a performance plan, set milestones, goals, not during their performance, and if they don't meet that, then maybe you give them time off without pay. And then if they don't smarten up, they pack up their stuff and they go.
well, you
That's
have to
what-
understand, we never had a you or someone in charge like that doing that. That never happened.
Right.
There were
And I
no,
don't-
there were no performance reviews.
Because my fear is, you know, of course, we're so small, you know, in bigger organizations, if you use money as leverage for discipline, the person's probably gonna walk out the door. You know, if I said, no, you're not getting your raise, but his colleague or his buddy gets one, that's just gonna cause rift. And perhaps maybe that does send him out the door, and maybe that's a good thing. But in this labor market, you wanna try to keep who you got if they're really good. And you don't wanna like leverage and discipline with raises. Cause, you know, I got my codes guys, you know, he's got two master's degrees, he's a smart guy. We wanna keep him, there's not much that I can do with him either, other than he goes to trainings because those codes change every 3 years. He has to stay up to date with it. And he's invested into his career. We gotta hang on to that guy, you know, cause he's good at what he's doing, and a way to keep him, and this is all about recruitment and retention. And the labor market's tough, and so I just don't like using money to discipline people. I'd rather just find other ways to do it. So, yeah, that's just my.
So I have two questions based on what you just said. With that in mind, why didn't you propose an increase in the fire department's labor line?
He just went through that.
Yeah, he just talked to you.
Well, right, but he got a 5% raise last year along with the laborers, so
Joe.
if you're doing another 5% raise this year, why isn't it across, I'm just asking,
Yeah, I know.
why isn't it across the
They got
board?
more than 5%.
Right, so we work well together. So when he came in and I asked him about, do we want to give your fire department a 5% raise? He said no. That's why I didn't do it.
Yeah, and it's
Okay,
also
and
true,
that's fine.
no,
I was
per
just-
diem schedules are different than standard pay schedules.
Okay.
It's a different animal.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't, a lot of these decisions that I've made in here was in consultation with the department heads.
Okay.
It's not just me dictating to them. We have good people here that I trust that.
Hey Jerry, just quick, hey, thanks for this COLA increase with the reference towns. My only question to that is, it doesn't tell me what the market is. It
Right.
tells me what they're
Right.
going up. Is there anything that reflects current market of what,
No.
whether it's a town treasurer or whatever it may be?
And another thing it doesn't tell you is what did they get last year or anything.
Well,
This-
yeah.
These are
Are
just,
they playing catch-up?
right, and I don't know that. There's emails that go out on the main town and city managers, they're saying, what are you proposing for COLAs this year? I just copied it, they put it together, and
So
I
save that
understand.
for next year.
In
then
the
we'll know.
past, I don't know, it's probably been maybe 5 years now, we had data from.
It's only a percentage, and it
It's
really
probably
doesn't
been
tell you
6
what the
years,
basis
I think.
is.
We
Really
did.
not.
Ruth or somebody, might even have been in the select board prior to us, Mark might be able to test, but they would, they would summarize, soup to nuts from basically select persons to, town clerks to et cetera, town managers and just give us a baseline to see we were at with a comparable town, so we would know if we were at market, above market, and then we would weigh, what the question would always be, well, we might be a little light on the wages, but our health insurance and benefits are a little heavier than theirs, so there was a balance there, so.
We've actually, so it's only actually been 2 or 3 years since we
Has it
did
been?
that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well, this stuff all
because
blends
that's, a
together.
lot of that's on the MMA website, and we've kind of, because we've had, so much turnover the last couple of years, as these new positions have come up, we have gone to the MMA site to benchmark kind of where we need to be, for a new town clerk, or a new town manager, and a new fire chief, and a new deputy treasurer, so that work's been kind of being done on an ad hoc basis.
Yeah.
But it hasn't been like a comprehensive, okay, here's everything, are we,
Yeah, no, my only, the question always comes up with, we try to find similar demographics for the town of Durham. It's typically how we've kind of done that, but it's not really indicative of our market. Our market is really our neighbors and what our neighbors are paying. It's not what the town of Greenville's paying. It's what's the town of Lisbon paying, because it's really not, it's pretty cost effective to drive across the bridge for $5, $6, $7 more per hour. We need to be cognizant of that more so than.
yeah, that's definitely part of the conversation.
We've done that in actually more than 2 or 3 years ago too, not just in that, but in health,
Sure.
things, stuff like that. And even though we look like we're in maybe sometimes the right spot, but just what Kevin said, we're sitting right in the middle of
Right.
Brunswick, Lewiston, Auburn, New Gloucester, Elizabeth, so that's where our competition is.
Exactly.
Question.
Yes, Bill?
Go for it, Bill.
Talk, Bill, talk quick. Nobody's talking.
So I'm just a little confused. So the the fire chief is just one, salaried position, a contracted position. But we have a town clerk, we have a deputy tax collector, we have a code enforcement officer.
It hasn't
we have
gotten to
a-
that
a
yet.
mana-
We haven't got
we
to
have a
that.
Book gets
manager.
changed.
Yeah, I haven't gotten there, so you can ask the question ahead of time, maybe when I get there, I'll answer it, but.
Well, just according to your latest spreadsheet, I see the increases all over the place.
Yeah.
And none as low, they're all higher than the 5% increase being offered to the fire chief.
No, you don't go with those percentages in there. These increases and decreases are based off the 22 budget compared to the 23 budget, not actually what they're getting paid by hour.
Fire chiefs, so the 5% that you're proposing for the fire chief, that's based on an hourly pay?
No, his pay was right at, the 73.5. That's
His pay was right, but all the numbers we're seeing here are wrong.
pretty much, if you look at the hourly rate that they're getting paid.
Why are we given a sheet with wrong numbers?
No,
No,
they're
you
not,
don't-
they're not wrong, it's just that there's other things, when you're looking at the annual number of the budget and the actual, there are things like, was that employee, did they work like every hour of every week that, that they were budgeted for? Maybe they did, maybe they didn't, so, or was that position vacant for part of the year and that's why the actual is low and now the budget the next year is high. I mean, there's all those variables that go in. So I think what Jerry's trying to say is that if you're looking at the plus minus increase decrease column and you for a particular position's salary and you're expecting that to be plus 5%, it's not gonna be plus 5% because that's not the only thing on an annual basis that's in those numbers.
Let me try to explain it this way. When this budget was put together, they didn't get their raise. So that was put in, now they got their raise, so their actual is gonna be a little bit different. And so then I'm gonna base this budget on the last budget, so I can't go in and change the 22 budget. That was fixed.
Right.
So they're gonna get a raise, they're gonna make more money, but I'm gonna base this budget on that raise, that hourly rate, and times that by 5%, and that's why you're seeing what that is. This, you know what?
And sometimes it's like in the case of the town clerk, it's not just a 5% increase, it's more hours during the week, so that's why.
And we'll talk about that too, but I think this, if we just use Trio to do this, this would really.
We will, so.
Well,
I
next
think
year is
just-
gonna be
I think-
so much
I think we've
easier.
covered that there's there's issues with Trio, and this isn't as exact and precise as we would all like and hope that it will be next year. But at the end of the day, it's what's more important is the bottom line number for each article, not necessarily the
Oh, don't be going
known skewed detail at the line item level, because that needs to be cleaned up.
Yes, sir.
A, thank you, I appreciate that. But B, my actual, if you're looking at that, and
It's
I'll
too
just go-
much.
No, thank you, Neil. I'll just be truthful and honest, there's nothing to hide here. I contracted and signed on and started September 20th at 70,000, that was my contract. But clearly I didn't make that in 2021. So that continued into 2022, and May 1st, when they voted for a 5% raise for myself and the fire department, I was already 5 months into the whole 2022 pay
Right.
scale. So I didn't get a 5% raise January 1st.
Right.
So that's where those numbers are. Apparently I made 70,938 last year. That doesn't include, you get the 72 cents.
retroactive.
Thank you.
Retroactive,
Uh-huh.
that's basically.
Right, so that's why those numbers are different. So he is basing it off of 73.5, because in theory, that's what I'm at. So if you add a 5% to that, that's where you get the 77.1.
Right.
But I haven't made that yet.
Right, no,
So if you need a loan.
that explanation makes sense, but
Okay.
it's not the same when we look under these other positions. That
Correct.
same math doesn't seem to be
Okay.
working. Same
Al, do you
formula.
have something?
So,
So that wasn't right, if you're going in with a 5% increase, and you're basically waiting till April 1st to get that approval, is it retroactive?
No,
Okay,
Don't open that can.
so that makes a big that affects that too.
right. But that's
That's what he just said.
calculating that for every position and when it's gonna happen, I don't know when the magic number is of when it is gonna take effect, right? These raises might take effect on the anniversary date of when they got hired.
So it's not effective April 1st, once the town meeting is gone?
Is that how you
That
did
would
it in
be
the
typical,
past?
yeah.
Cause now I'm
Basically,
hearing merit increases when they should be done, and I'll do it myself, but
I think the town employee handbook actually says on their anniversary date.
Not for
I'm not saying that that's the way it
increases.
should be, but I think,
Benefits go off the anniversary date, but wage increases not necessarily.
is that when it typically
Like
happens?
when you accrue, they accrue benefits on their
I can't look
employee,
at this and compare apples and apples.
anniversary date, that's what it's based on. But in terms of wages, effective date of wages has varied a lot, even over just the
That's what
years that I've been.
confusing as hell.
So, but I think the expectation is that if whatever's approved at town meeting for, April
I know.
1st for
I know.
wages, is that the new rate would take effect at like the start of the next pay period after town meeting.
Right. Go ahead, Joshua.
No, go ahead.
I have one more comment too.
Go ahead.
No,
I've been waiting patiently through several people talking.
yeah,
so
that's
go for
okay,
it.
go ahead. No, I'm all set. Go ahead.
You never get
Sorry if I wrote.
No, you're fine,
Retrospectively.
yeah, no, I'm just being Jill, sorry.
Don't change, continue to be Joe.
So, just because you are new and nobody has given you the heads up, this isn't the first time you're gonna hear this level of emotion about this. Because as Kevin did point out, people literally do look at the line and go, fire department chief's getting an extra 5%? Now, if they're friends with somebody's house who burnt down, they're gonna be all for it. If their house hasn't burnt down, who knows which way they're gonna be. But it's gonna get a little bit murkier and muddier when they're looking at the increase decrease and they're seeing 41% or they're seeing 38%. So it might be helpful to have like a breakdown to be like, employee C was making $18.50 from January until April, and then was making got a 5% raise and was making this amount. But because the budget is based on here, that's why the percentage looks so high now. Like, it might be helpful to have a very basic explanation at town hall.
I would say that the town manager should be prepared to answer a question like that if it comes up. But let's keep in mind, we are not doing a line-by-line analysis at town meeting. We are approving an article
But
amount.
you know that's
And
gonna
no, let
come
me
up.
finish, please. Even if the town, if there are people who get up on the floor and say, no, I don't think this person should get a raise, and even if the article were reduced by a certain amount, that doesn't mean that the person's not getting a raise. It just means that there's that much less total money to spend, and that the money might have to come from somewhere else. Ultimately, that's the town manager's call on how to do that.
Yes, but I think my comment is getting lost. What I am saying is, some people may try and reduce that bottom line because they're going under the assumption that somebody is getting a 40% raise. And if we can clarify that misunderstanding, then there may be less deductions recommended at town meeting.
One way we can take care of this is just have a wages line and not have everybody listed.
Broken down.
That's your typical fundamental budget. You have wages, regular, overtime.
Well, you have that
part-time.
with public works, you
Right,
have that with
right,
fire
it's-
department, but you don't have it with
Exactly.
administrative. I
It's
don't know
very
why.
inconsistent.
but-
That's how Trio is set up right now. I
Yeah,
think that's an
right.
example of one of the things he wants to fix for next year, so that next year, I suspect, you're not gonna see line item for meeting secretary, town clerk, deputy tax collector. You're not gonna see the line items for those.
And and to do the budget, this creates a lot of math. Whereas if you have a wage line, I can just like do like a couple computations, and I've got FICA, workman's comp, I gotta go down and add up everybody's. This is a very, very,
Convoluted.
convoluted, yeah, it's just not a professional budget, you know, because it,
I think we kind of all accept that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a no.
yeah, go ahead, Heather.
So I just wanna say that I don't think Jill was necessarily, I saw that met with some defensiveness, and I don't think that was what her
No.
intention was. I'm just saying, the way that things used to work is that what we are seeing is what was in the annual report. And I remember people literally getting up at the microphone and they would highlight every single percentage that was over what they deemed acceptable and would scrutinize that. And so while they're not seeing this in the annual report anymore, you know, there are people who will do that kind of research, and I think that that was more
Yeah.
of heeding a warning, because what is typical in Durham is that if the voters are educated and understand where the numbers are coming from, they're more inclined to vote for it than if there's any confusion around the issue, people will just vote no. And
Yeah.
so I think she was trying to
Yeah.
help
Right.
versus hinder what's here.
Oh, I apologize if I came off defensive. This has just been a very difficult way to budget, and it's, my head hurts. My brain is bleeding, okay, over this. It really is. So that's one thing that you know, one way we can take care of that, we have a wages line. Whatever we decide we're gonna do for wages, you just do that percentage. Here's another thing that I would like to do next year is have this discussion before we do the budget. Before I get into the budget, we come together and we specifically talk about, well, is there anything that we wanna fund this year that we haven't funded? And what do we wanna give for raises? So I can, when I build the budget, we all know that it's in there, and I'm not going back and forth and doing this and doing that, because it will be loaded into, I will load it into Trio and won't push the button, but I don't wanna keep going back, because the more you do that, the more likely you make mistakes, right? So that's one way we can kinda take, cause right now, and Jill, you're absolutely right. I mean, you're setting up the town manager to fumble all over himself because he can't, I really can't explain it. I mean, I know what's there, I know that I'm comparing the 23 budget to the 22, but when the 22 budget was developed, things changed, and now this is their actuals, their hourly rates changing, and that's what I'm basing 23 on, is what they're actually making now, not when 22 was developed. So it's very hard to,
So isn't, you were saying that Trio has to be inputted in the beginning of the year.
But without
Correct.
pushing the button to make it active.
Okay, so if you go in now, after the town meeting, and you make all these changes, will we see a better budget for next year, better laid out budget for next year, or is that gonna
Yes.
take a whole nother year?
Yeah, and it'll look exactly like this. So over the summer, I'm gonna try to redo the whole thing, which I gotta talk to Trio about that, because I'm gonna give it different numbers, right? Cause it's gonna be a 3-layered system now, not a 2-layered system. So I gotta talk to them to see how that affects the old budgets with the new. So I would like to do that. And I'm
He's
gonna-
also he said before that he's gonna try to line it up with the auditor recommendations so that
Right,
it
makes it easier.
Yeah,
matches better with
Yeah.
what the information that they're looking for.
yeah.
Mhm.
So, anyway.
Good luck.
Yeah, thanks. So, we'll move on down to the clerk and all that. So I stand behind what I said the other day, where you fund the position and not the person, okay? With that said, I know we need to get a different treasurer, and to get a good one, we're gonna have to ask for more money. You'll see that I did reduce the benefits for the clerk and the CEO where they don't take them. I don't think they're going anywhere in the next year. I know it flies in the face of what I said, I get it. But I don't, I don't like it because funding the position and not the person is just fundamental budgeting. I'm willing to work with you, reduce them, because pretty much, they're not going anywhere in the next year, and I think I can roll the dice on that all day long. It's a risk, because I would never tell anyone I'm 100% sure they're gonna stay, because you don't know what employees are gonna do from one week to the next. They could leave. I don't, but I'm pretty sure there's kind of like this renewed energy in the town office. So I think they're gonna be okay, although I will tell you that there was somebody petitioning our clerk to go to work for Gray for $70,000 an hour as the head clerk. Okay, so that stuff happens, and maybe you feel differently, but I'm just letting you know that I'm willing to work to try to keep this budget reasonable, because the fire and the public works they're sitting pretty good. It's the administration that is really where we need help.
And he's not backing off his principle at all in terms of funding the position, but when we talked after Tuesday, we said, yeah, we wanna get there, but maybe we don't need to get there in 1 year.
Right.
You know, so I think that's what he's.
I don't like it, but I'll take that risk. Like I said, I'm willing to work with you on that. And not only that, if something happens and I gotta come back here and people say, well, what happened? I'm gonna say, view the tape. Okay, so.
And let's hope the tape is available.
Right.
Right?
So, yeah. So, in doing that, for Jessica now, and there's one other thing that I wanna tell you, that one thing that I didn't understand when I first started here was, we were closed on Wednesday, but everybody was in the office. I'm like, well, why aren't we open? And they're like, well, it's been like that. Well, I wanna move to 36 hours. If we're gonna be there, the doors are gonna be open. We're gonna provide that service. So I'm moving so we're gonna be open all day. Once I get the positions filled, let me get my staff, because it would be difficult now, but, that's also the plan and why you're seeing some of the large increases. Is that I'm gonna open up Wednesday the same as Monday and Tuesday. So, yep.
When we're on the benefit line, this 24/5 or wherever, that represents the town paying 80% of that plan.
Of a
The
family
24/5
plan.
is 80% of the cost of a family plan.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And you know, whoever we hire might not take it.
Right, yep. I just
So
didn't
we-
know if that was the cost of the plan.
Yeah,
Or
it's like
if that's
30-something.
80% of
Yeah,
the
it's
plan.
like 30-something a year.
That's because family plans represent employee, a spouse, and children, and it can be one child or 27 childs. There's no, I remember asking, I've always asked this question, because I have one child, and I'm like, why do I have to be spending so much money on a family plan for one child?
You
And
self-employed,
they
you
didn't say
pay for
27,
6
I think they said it was good up to like 18 kids or something like that.
Well, that's more reasonable.
And I know, right? There's not much difference between that and 27, in my opinion, but, but that is one of the reasons why it's so costly.
So, the treasurer, I put 50 in there. I did what Kevin was talking about, where you go to MMA and you kind of look at comparables of what people are making. For a deputy treasurer, that's a little low, but I'm willing to cast a net to see what we get for a treasurer. And if they don't take the family plan, then I have a little wiggle room there to maybe get them up. So that's what I'm comfortable with those two numbers to
So
get another treasurer.
realistically, if you find the right person and they don't take the plan, they could walk away with 70,000,
Who's gonna walk
200
away?
and something. You could actually offer them that for a salary if they didn't take the family plan, you just minus out the 1,200.
They
Well,
could,
I mean,
but
that's
they
what
would.
we're giving you
can't
the
legally negotiate that way, though. You can't say, well, the only thing you can say, if you don't take insurance at all,
Right.
if you choose
We'll
that,
give
then
you a
you get
stipend.
this added. But you can't say, well, if you take insurance, your salary's this, but if you don't take insurance, your salary's this other number. That legally, we can't do that.
But there's room in there technically to have that happen should that right person come along.
If it happens, like for instance, you know,
But you can't even,
but you
ask that
can't
until
even ask it
after
up front.
onboard.
It would happen, it might happen, but you can't guide it to happen.
Yeah, you can't really ask, like, how many kids do you have, what's your husband do, what's your wife do?
Mhm.
Does he have insurance? I mean, that's,
Mhm.
you can't do that.
Did you have anything?
No, I guess I was just piggybacking on what she was saying, that you had said if you find out that the insurance amount is less, then you're willing to take 10 grand, 20 grand, whatever, off of the insurance line and put it into the salary line, is what was kinda heard, so we're
Right,
just trying to
I would kinda
clarify.
negotiate what their starting pay was if I,
But you don't know what their insurance is.
I
Right,
don't.
you don't. That's right, you
You don't, and,
Most people, when applying for a job, will be upfront with that.
right.
Sometimes
I'm not
if they
taking
volunteer it,
So
that's
that's,
different.
again,
Right.
again, it's a risk, I mean, I'm just trying, I'm trying my hardest to keep this at a reasonable, but
Gotta
good,
figure it out.
good staff, yeah.
This is
Heather,
So, and maybe you don't know this yet, because this is all sort of new. I'm just wondering if you had mentioned one time about contracting some of that out, and so I'm wondering if that would somehow affect the amount of hours that position would hold. And I'm not asking you to have numbers that represent that. I'm just trying to get an idea of what you foresee if part of that was contracted out. Would that reduce the hours needed for this person, or would that still be a 36-hour-a-week position?
okay, all right, I had a conversation today with, an accounting firm. I think, and don't hold me to it, I think I can contract that whole position out. They'll do everything, payroll, they work with RKO, they'll do the accounts payable, they will get our stuff back in order. It's gonna be, I'm thinking it's gonna be 65 to 70,000 to contract that out per year. If that happens, I'm eliminating that position.
Is that still covering
So-
all the counter hours you need if you do that?
Well, that's gonna be tough, because both of those people are,
They need vacations.
they do, and if you wanna give me another employee, that's fine, but I'm doing it. Listen, our accounting is messed up. So I wanna hire somebody to go in, to contract out, everything's gonna be taken care of, they're certified public accountants, there'll be no accusations of embezzlement, there'll be nothing like that. It
Well, I
is
mean,
what
that
it is.
amount that you're talking about, replaces this salary and that.
But
and
you
so-
lose the counter help.
Right, but you lose the counter help. So
But-
then the other thing that I would just like you to entertain, and part of that is because, like, I do payroll and I know how much every person makes that I pay, right? I own the business, so I don't want other people knowing that. It makes it an interesting position when the person who is doing this job knows how much the other person working next to them is making
It's all public anyway.
when it,
In that
Yeah,
case,
it's
in
all-
our case
It's
here,
all public information.
Yeah.
What everybody makes for the town is public.
Nothing we can hold,
Right.
nothing we can.
it's nothing
Yeah,
private.
Because,
but do you see what I'm saying though? Like if you're giving a raise or
Outside
whatever,
services
and that person doesn't get the raise, or that
Oh, he's
person
giving
only
raises
gets
to
their.
everybody.
But
Mayor-
at the end of the year, it's gonna be a buck.
Yeah, but
It's
how
all
is it, what, you have to go and ask though, right? Like I can't go.
No, it's in the book.
Yeah, you
Look
can
up
ask.
Selectman Rich George made
Yeah.
$2,100
Yeah, it's
last
listed.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
in the
yeah,
annual
that's true, that's
report.
true, that's
Yeah.
true,
But
you're right, you're right.
to what you're saying though, what you described actually happened.
Yes, it did.
In the office when
Happens
Kathy
in
was
every
doing it.
job.
exactly.
When one person got a raise, the other person didn't, threw a little bit of a conniption fit, and so she gave her the raise too. So that definitely,
Right, well, and that's what I'm saying is that I feel, I wouldn't want one of my employees being the person paying everybody every week and them all know it, you know what I'm saying? I can understand how that would be a difficult situation, and so the payroll part of it, which I feel is an expense, where I pay $30 a week. I know I don't have nearly as many employees as the town has, but I do feel like payroll being
We-
contracted out is.
We have looked at that a couple times, and what has stopped us from doing it is that at the end of the day, there wasn't gonna be, because of the Trio system, there wasn't going to be, any savings, because when a municipality hires a payroll company, somebody at the town office still has to go enter all that data in Trio that they get from the payroll company. So
Right.
we have looked at that a
We should do
couple
it
times,
ourselves.
and the payroll companies have actually told you, like, I'm not gonna save you any money.
Right.
Because you're basically doing it twice, so.
Heather, I looked into that, I had the payroll company in my office talking about it, he said, this isn't worth it, cause you're just gonna have to,
Yeah.
you're too small, you don't have enough employees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Heather, when you do your payroll, you probably put it as a general expense, right? Payroll, you don't put each individual
Right.
in every week.
Right.
We still have to put the individual in on top of the expense.
So, but I
Yes.
think, to kind of, try to put a bow on this a little bit, so what Jerry is gonna be charged with is, he has to staff the counter adequately the way he wants, and whether it's the person he hires, or contracting, or whatever, get good, sound financial management in the office within this budget. We won't know sitting here when we approve this amount exactly what the approach will end up being, but what's important is that, whatever the number is, that's what he's gotta work with,
Yeah.
to get it accomplished.
Right, so the town of Monmouth and the town of Greenville uses the same company, they're the only ones in Maine that do it. And I'm just gonna be right up in front with you, if I get a good quote, I am gonna approach the selectmen, and I don't usually beg for anything for services, but I'm probably gonna make an exception, because I want the accounting for this town to be right, I want it to be accurate, I want it to be certified, and they work with RKO. This is gonna make life a little bit simpler.
Who's RKO?
They're our auditor that gave us the really nasty report. So,
I think we're overselling the nastiness of it.
No, no,
It
no,
wasn't
no.
great, but it wasn't like, it wasn't the worst rating you could get.
Nobody got fired.
It wasn't
Yeah, well,
even
she
close
did-
to the
no,
worst
but
rating
she-
you could get.
well, no, but she did say that at the meeting, didn't you
No,
say?
she didn't.
so you
Run
said
the
it was the
tape on that.
highest.
She didn't say that.
So I just have one more question. What if it, let's say it came in around the number of those two combined lines? It takes the social security, the FICA, all
Yep.
that stuff out of that.
It does, yeah, workman's comp, and,
But it doesn't get you a window person.
Right.
right, but we've been basically working with two people at the window now, and I know I get it,
You're
Jane,
backpedaling.
I do, well,
You're about to unsell your earlier.
well, no.
I know, right?
Well, no, so it's either we get three window people and keep the accounting the way it is, or we hire somebody that knows what they're doing.
Well, the part of this that is intriguing to me is that if we lose that position,
There you go.
we don't lose
The accounting.
the institutional knowledge of the accounting, if it's
Right.
contracted out.
Right,
It's the same reason
Look.
we don't have an in-house IT person, because
Right.
you need to contract that.
I'll be really interested to see what that quote comes back at.
yeah, and they're coming in on February 14th to talk to the board to kind of, so if the board has questions, they can vet it out.
Neil, I'm interested in your opinion on this. We don't have to talk about it tonight, though. We
Yeah.
can do that in
Yeah, so
ours.
we're-
Yep,
we're
sorry.
definitely- We're
Yep, sorry,
beyond
sorry.
that's okay, it's good discussion, but.
I gotta be in
but
bed by 9.
we do have to move on,
Yep.
so.
And I really only have really one more, that's different, and that's Cindy. I'm paying, right now, she's making $17.50. So I'd like to bump her up to 21 and go to 36 hours a week. When we go to, I got a budget for it, because that's where I'd like to go once we're up and running and full staff.
And you're taking town clerk to 36 hours a week as
Yeah,
well?
she would go 32.
She's okay with that?
Yeah, we have to, because,
Because she wasn't for a while.
I know,
Wait a
she's,
minute,
there's
you
been
just-
some renewed energy.
Okay, all right.
You're making a comment, she's okay with that, then you say, I budget the position, I don't budget the person.
Right,
So why are you arguing about that person having anything to do with that? Well, I know that they
All right,
should
that-
have.
My
Well, I'm
bad,
not
I shouldn't have
sure.
asked the question now.
what's that? I'm not,
Let's move on.
Be
Oh,
careful
I don't-
what you say,
what did I say?
nothing.
No, call me out, I'm serious.
No, I'm not gonna get into, no.
Code enforcement? That's the next one?
He's the same, that's unchanged from last time.
Unprofessional procedure times.
You don't wanna tell me what you're upset about?
So
And
why
when
is
you-
Cindy getting a 20% raise?
Cause she's making $17.50, that's why.
I don't think.
$17.50. That's what she makes. She can go eat burgers at Burger King, do the night shift for that money. And she's handling all the cash and everything that comes into that.
Do you have a benchmark? I mean, what does that position generally pay in the neighborhood? Do you know that, Jerry?
Well, the two people that were doing it before were getting paid $23.79.
That's what she's
Thank you.
The other one, the part-time one,
That's helpful.
that has the
So I'd still like to clarify something or why you're upset or.
I'll just say it because I'm a person who says it.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you had said that you fund the position, not the person.
Right.
And then Kevin asked if our current clerk was okay moving to 36 hours because she hasn't been in the past.
Yep.
And you said yes, that you talked about it. And that bothers Alan because that means that moving to 36 hours appears to be contingent on whether or not our current clerk would move to 36 hours. I don't think that he's necessarily upset with you. I think that was more like upsetness with Kevin in that moment, but
I think that's I think there might be a misassumption there, because I don't think we're saying that, oh, the town clerk decided she'd rather work 36 than 32 hours, so we're gonna change the position. I don't think that's what we're saying. I think.
no, I don't think that's not the way I took it at all. I don't know if that's the way Alan took it.
Yeah,
I think what Alan was saying is if we're trying to construct a budget that's based on position, not the person, and you wanna open the town office on Wednesdays and therefore you need a clerk that's gonna work 36 hours,
Right.
then we should be talking about that and not whether or not our current clerk is willing to work 36 hours.
Well, I would check that and I think, I'm right with you until that last point. It's like, I think he's saying that he needs the position to be 36 hours a week. And my question is the current holder of that position okay with that?
Right.
Because she hasn't been in the past, because if she's not okay with that,
can't
and that's the need, then that's a different issue, right?
Right.
But if she's okay with that, then we don't have an issue.
Can we move on?
Yeah.
Yep.
We all set,
Yeah,
Jerry?
I'm good. I'm good if you're all good.
So,
Did you get information on trash?
Oh, yeah, let's talk, let's
talk
talk.
trash.
about
Let's talk trash.
Yeah,
Two
So,
sentence update,
yeah.
because we don't have all the information.
right, so had a meeting, with the seller, and they're going to an automated system in a couple of years. So we're gonna do a 1-year extension with them until we can figure out what we wanna do as a town.
What was
with-
the price?
They haven't sent it yet. They're getting out of the labor market because they can't find the help to do the rear dumps anymore.
So
What does moving to an automated system mean? Oh, like the arm picks
Yeah,
up the thing?
and-
Okay.
yeah, and,
I can't put my trash bags.
and there is gonna be some impact to that, it's gonna be a little bit different, but, so, because our contract runs out on June 30th, we're gonna get a price for an extension for 1 year, and so we can let you all know what's going on, with the trash, cause it could get a little expensive and complicated.
Right. Right.
Do you,
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of unknowns.
there is,
But I get their explanation for why they're doing it made complete sense. I mean, we all know how tough the labor market is right now. Imagine how tough it is in a tough labor market to get somebody to ride around on the back of a trash truck hauling trash into the back of a truck all day. They're also facing pretty high workers' comp stuff because of injuries, rotator cuff and shoulders, and it's a very high cost labor force and unreliable, not the people, individuals, but as far as having a pool of people to draw from. They're going to, day labor organizations, and they're not getting, a caliber of worker that they used to get. So more to come, but the short term is a 1-year extension of the current contract, and they're gonna send a proposal to Jerry for what the rate for that would be, current service, same, everything.
so we don't have any interruption until we get it figured out. They didn't wanna get into any more than that.
And then the bulky waste thing would be part of that, but separated out?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So, has the decision already been made then that we're not going out for bid for solid waste this year?
Yes.
Okay.
We'll go out, when we get ready to do another 3-year contract, that's when we'll go out to bid again.
You know, looking forward, really, trash, I think, is gonna be an issue, and it's gonna.
Trash is already an
I know.
issue.
We need to talk about it, cause it isn't getting any better out there in that regard. A lot of towns are struggling with the trash thing. I mean, when I sat on the board of the American Public Works Association, if you were in Public Works and you were dealing with trash, those directors would say, don't get into the trash business, cause it is the biggest PIA, that's in Public Works.
So that means everybody hiring their own company to come in and pick up?
Someone in the municipality that I worked before, they didn't do trash pickup. They gave Augusta, their landfill, $45,000 for basically an impact fee. And the people in Gardner brought their own garbage up there.
We'll have to be reimbursed in our taxes for
know,
that, because, you know.
No, I'm just saying, trash is it's difficult out there in the trash.
So
world.
what do people do that don't have the capacity to be able to do that?
What's
They
that?
have to have
They get a
a,
little dumpster, like, I don't know, like 15, 16 years ago, and I don't know if it's still the thing, like Topsom, I don't believe they had like a service, you had to hire
right, no, my
somebody.
parents live in Topsom,
Yeah,
and
do they
my
still
dad
do it?
did,
Freeport's like that.
Freeport's
my-
like that.
right,
So
my
you'd have
dad
to hire
brought
an
it,
individual
but-
that would come
yeah.
around, like there was a guy in town that I think was trying to start it up, or you could call like a Trajano or somebody of that
Yeah.
nature and
Trajano.
get yourself a 5-yard, and they'd come pick it up every week or two, depending on your
It's
usage.
hard.
Sabatis does not have trash pickup.
Yeah, a lot of towns
They
do.
don't
Right.
have recycling.
It's
Yeah.
not as
It's-
uncommon as you would
Yeah.
think it would
That's
be.
hard.
that's how I grew up in Topsom, and that's how it
Yeah.
was, how when I grew up. I had one question, oh, go ahead, who was?
Yeah, Neil's had his hand up for a while.
Shoot me now.
So, we've heard a lot about how screwed up the town's books are, which leads to a lot of stuff going on in my head, and I assume other people's heads. Can you give us a thumbnail of why they're screwed up?
Well, like, for instance, because the people that were in there didn't really know where stuff was going, opera funds, right? So opera funds was more of a grant, it got put into revenue. Well, at the end of the year, revenue gets canceled out, and you start over because you're collecting no more revenue. So the opera funds really should have gone into the general ledger account. So now we gotta go in there and kinda do all this journaling to get it back. So if you don't, and the town went through a major transition,
And
and,
not enough training. You
well,
can't-
right, but
You can't blame
not-
people when they're
not so much
properly
that,
trained.
but just,
It's not just the training.
it's not just
thing.
training.
Was the person originally hired, qualified for the position? Because sometimes no matter how much training there is, they're not gonna get there. And it's also, you know, you can go back years and years and years, it's just as, you know, different administrators do things a little bit differently. And everybody makes a little change to the chart of accounts, and, you know, and it's just the cumulative effect of that over the years is inconsistency in the charts of accounts across departments, and labels of things that, you know, the person that did it at the time knows what it means, but the next person who comes in may not know what it means. So that's the type of stuff Jerry's
I
got to
mean,
clean up.
we were here the other day, and Rich was looking at our payroll, and there was like 3 or 4 voided checks to the same company. So it's kinda knowing what you're doing, and we didn't have that, so it was it's pretty evident, when you look at the stuff.
And who has that knowledge now?
We don't have anyone in there that has any kind of accounting background that,
And so how are we gonna fix that?
I'm gonna,
That's what we've been talking about for the last, you know,
Right.
half hour with the position, the deputy treasurer hiring a more skilled person there, or the contracting it out potentially.
Well,
as an
and
option.
didn't you say you hired someone to come in and reconcile the bank statements?
yeah, so.
Yeah.
And see, and that's another thing, when you hire on the cheap like we did before, and things aren't really getting done right, cause there's really not a good understanding of how it does, Then we gotta hire someone to come in and fix it. And then I gotta spend my time looking at it going, well, this doesn't seem right. It's like when I printed the GL report, I'm like, where are the opera funds? I had to ask
Well,
them.
that was one of my questions.
I
that
know,
had,
and
yeah.
it got put into revenue, and that wasn't really the place for it. And if you don't have anybody looking at that and overseeing it, then people are gonna be like, well, where is it? So it's me that's kinda going in there and asking these questions, what about this and what about that, and why is this like this? But I'm not an accountant, like I said the other day. I've taken plenty of budgeting classes, but I have taken no accounting to get my public management degree. It's just a skill that's why this company does it. It's why Monmouth has hired this company. It's why Greenville does. And it's really hard to find an employees out there. The labor market is really shallow. It's probably why you ended up with me.
I'd like to do a time check, please. It's 9:00, 9:01. I'd like to wind down the budget committee's portion of the meeting. If the select board would like to keep on going, you're welcome to. Budget committee, if I can take a moment to just talk about budget committee. Thanks. We have 2 meetings scheduled. On Tuesday, January 31st, and Thursday, February 2nd. We had earlier talked about a start time of 6 o'clock, but I know for at least one member that presents a challenge. Does anybody have an objection if the meetings were to start at 6:30? We're talking about Tuesday, Chief, can you hold on a second? We're talking about Tuesday, January 31st, and Thursday, February 2nd, with the meeting starting at 6:30. Hopefully not running later than 9:30. And no objections?
Or even if you guys were willing to do 6:15. I know I can make it here by 6:15. 6 o'clock.
Let's 6:30 and keep it
6:30 is
6:30.
fine.
No objections to 6:30?
Location though?
The location will be at the town hall.
Insurance line.
Should be.
Jerry,
Yeah.
our meetings will be held at the town hall. Is that used to work
Sure.
for the budget committee? And the format, I'd like to keep the same format as what we just did with the combined. I'd like to have I'd like to work on the chief's budget on Tuesday, the 31st, if that works for you, Chief Tripp.
I'll have to get back to you.
As opposed to a Thursday, which you would definitely have I'm pretty sure have a meeting that night. So I'm proposing that we review the chief's budget and part of the administrative budget. Does that work for you, Jerry? On Tuesday, January 31st. And then on if we don't finish the administrative budget, we would finish it on Thursday, the 2nd.
Pardon me, but why do you need to go through a review all over again? Because
Well, we typically, the budget committee has a discussion. If a department head wishes to participate, they're welcome to.
Okay.
So what?
Right, so you're gonna be
On Tuesday, we're gonna be
reacting to
discussing.
our recommended budget.
Right.
and that
Correct.
stuff.
draft articles.
Will we have draft articles in time for January 31st meeting?
I don't know if you'll have, you'll have, I don't know if you'll have the actual articles, you'll have the budget, you'll have the number, and then you make your recommendation on the number.
But how do we know financially, how's that gonna relate to the specific article?
Because we're not assigning revenue to specific articles this year.
Well, I know we're not, but we're talking about appropriation.
Right, so basically what you'll be doing is you're only concerned on the article level with the appropriation.
Mm-hmm.
And then part of the information you'll receive in the tax impact spreadsheet is, that's where it will show, okay, here's the revenues we're putting against the budget, and here's what the, it'll have to be a separate article, like with undesignated funds to go against the budget.
So will we have, based on what has been presented to us by department now, that's the only articles that should be on a department basis? Like if
Say
we
that
have
again,
one,
I'm not sure I
if we have one for administration, we have one for
Yep.
Eureka, we have one for planning,
Yep,
okay.
yep.
So the budget committee, the agenda I'm setting up is that we're gonna start by reviewing the fire department budget on Tuesday, January 31st. Chief Tripp, you're welcome to attend if you'd like. And we'll get into the administrative budget. Whatever we don't finish on Tuesday, we'll finish the administrative budget on Thursday, February 2nd, and then do the public works budget. That-
In
that's
CIP,
what I want.
correct?
Sure, how's that work?
Usually the chief brings them.
Ah, you're quick.
Well played.
Crustals.
He makes
Maybe
his-
by 6:30 I'll have time to stop at Durham Get and Go for dinner, so I'll grab you something.
Any other business to come in front of the budget committee this evening?
What?
Is
What'd
there
you say?
Any other business to come
Oh,
for the budget committee?
no, I need to ask permission for the way that I need to attend. I can do that after. I've already talked to you about it, I just need to talk to Jerry about it.
Fine. All right, so the budget committee portion of the meeting, I guess, is done. Thank you.
Jerry?
Where's my card?
Second.